I would like to go ahead and call to order this meeting of January 13th, 2009, and we will start by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And moving on down our agenda, item C2, we have Spanish translation available.
Sí, buenas noches y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Si hay alguien que necesita la ayuda de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can see from our slide up here that we do have headsets for the hearing impaired. If you need headsets, please let us know. C4, announcement of closed session action. We do have 3 items to report out of closed session. Number 1 is item B4. The board moved to adopt the proposed decision of the hearing officer in full to terminate an accounting technician 2, and the board shall provide a written decision. It was moved by Cordero, seconded by Deacon, and passed unanimously. On item B5, Cordero moved and Deacon seconded a motion to accept the legal settlements in the case number 2008100635, number 2008090985, and the agreement dated November 25th, 2008. And finally, item B6, public employee appointment. Mr. Herron moved and Mrs. Deacon seconded the appointment of Alan Hilton and Rick Nargi as interim co-directors of special education through the end of the school year, and to approve their application for earning exemptions to the state teachers' retirement system. And that passed unanimously. And we're on to C5, introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Well, we do have a wonderful presentation tonight. I'd like to introduce the McKinley principal, Emilio Handel, who will tell us more about the McKinley Folklorico Dance Group.
That's correct. Good morning, Dr. Good evening, Dr. Sarvis, and good evening, board members. It's a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. We do have about 10, 12 dancers for 2 different dances that they're going to present to you guys from 2 different regions of Mexico. They are guided by the Camarillo family that has been working at McKinley for many years, from what I understand, and talking to Mrs. Carmen Camarillo, who's brought her children through the McKinley School, and who have also, their children have come back to help us with the dancing portion. Mrs. Carmen Camarillo actually designed and put all of these dresses that you see tonight together, every single one of them, and volunteered her time. So between Carmen and Adriana and Eva and Agustin, they've put together this wonderful group, and I hope you enjoy them tonight. Eva will be telling us which region of Mexico the dance is from.
Good evening. So the first region they're going to be dancing is from Veracruz. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Thank you, girls. You did a great job. And thank you, guys.
Mr. Handel, may I just ask real quickly, what
Yes.
ages are these young ladies?
They range from 4th through 6th grade.
4 through 6.
Yes.
Well, young ladies, you looked fabulous in your clothes, and your hair is amazing, but the dancing was really incredible. So thank you, Mr. Handel, for bringing, and thank you so much for the instructors,
No, thank
for all the
you.
work that you're doing. Are there any parents here? Any parents?
No parents tonight.
Instructors? Okay, well, thank you for sharing the children. And ladies, just so you know, you can watch yourself on Channel 18 on Saturday at 5 o'clock. So you can see what you look like. You look great.
Good.
Thank you.
Good job.
Viva McKinley.
Yes. Any other items for C5?
No, that's it for introductions, proclamations, presentations, and recognitions.
All right, so we are moving on to C6 then, public comment. Do we have any speaker slips for public comment?
We have one from Ken Locke.
My name is Ken Locke, here once again. I spoke before the City Council. I mentioned that I'd be stopping in here. I mentioned to them the whole concept of mind-body medicine. I just did a video on YouTube. It's called Tennis and Mind-Body Medicine. What I'm claiming to be is the first tennis player, first athlete to be healed through the means of tennis. Sorry to have to inform participants of tennis that tennis hasn't provided the means for an integrated mind-body relationship. And what I represent is a standard of a teacher, healer, and I understand tennis as ambidextrous and non-competitive. Right now, we're in, as I mentioned to the City Council, we're in a dark age right now. And the next stage that we're going to enter into is where we understand our minds and bodies as integrated, as well as all disciplines. I'll be doing a video in relation to the fine art form of painting, or through the arts, and the basis I'm claiming to be the first painter to be enlightened and raised up as a teacher, healer, and so I have kind of a big job ahead of me. I'm hoping this all makes sense to some people. Again, I have, when it comes to the field of mind-body medicine, I'm going to, if you put those words into the YouTube search engine, I should be all over the place. Right now, again, that video I did, tennis and mind-body medicine. I mentioned in there right now we use, like Roger Federer represents kind of the #1 tennis player. I use him as an example of a person who actually suffers from an illness. And right now, in relation to our economy and our society, it needs to be reformed, as well as our educational system. Let's see, that's about it. I'm hoping that possibly in this community I could possibly get some people with me on this, and I'm hopeful of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Locke.
All right, we will move on.
Can we just take a time out so
Yes.
I can reassemble my desk?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely. We're
great.
going to have
Thank you.
a brief pause here.
We know who moved. I'll take notes.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to item C7, acceptance of donations.
Move to accept with appreciation.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. And then C8, superintendent's report.
Well, this is finals week for our secondary schools. The end of the semester will be Friday, January 16, and next Monday will be the start of a new semester. So, thank you. The state budget crisis continues. Our district has imposed a budget freeze, and we will be talking more about the state budget and the impact on the budget on tonight's agenda. Another item on tonight's agenda is our parcel tax committees. A related item that I want the board and the public to know about is the senior tax exemption. The parcel tax senior citizen exemption application will be ready tomorrow. The application form will be posted on the parcel tax section of the district's homepage, and we will also issue a news release informing the community that the form is ready to go. A number of us have focused on emergency planning and are becoming certified for emergency management. I recently completed a national training and am now a FEMA certified in incident command. Also gearing up to handle emergencies, we have a new instrument, a Principalm. It's a Palm Pilot type of device that's now being piloted at San Marcos High School and Santa Barbara Junior High. The handheld device, funded with school safety money, accesses all of our ARIES student information, including schedules. If you see a student on campus, you can pull out your Palm. You can see what class that student is supposed to be in, for example. Parental contact information, attendance, discipline. This new resource will be helpful, especially during emergencies. Instead of making printed copies of all of the student lists that we have to keep at the ready, we will have a number of people who have these Palms available. Yes, they are password protected, and they should be very helpful both in emergency situations and school events such as athletic games, when prompt identification and access to information would be beneficial. The board brief. My office regularly issues a report to the board called the board brief. This is a collection of reports and articles on school and district matters. A copy is on display in the reception area or can be provided through my office. I would like to highlight just one item in the December 18 board brief. In the last brief, the board saw a list of remaining bond fund priority projects that would be funded by the bond refinance funds approved by the board at our last meeting. They include projects at Peabody, McKinley, and Washington Elementary Schools, as well as secondary schools, Santa Barbara High, Dos Pueblos High School, and Goleta Valley Junior High. The elementary district projects identified in the board brief are expected to use all of the remaining major I-98 bond funds, including the bond refinance funding. The secondary district will likely complete priority 1A projects, and priority 2 will depend on successful grant applications. We'll talk a little bit more about state funding later. Recently, a letter to the editor appeared in the news press stating that athletic programs and after-school programs had been cut in local schools. This is not the case. We have not cut athletic programs or after-school sports. Upcoming events. Let me start with Martin Luther King Day. Winners of the Martin Luther King Student Writing Awards will be announced on January 9 during the 11 a.m. program at the Granada Theater. January 19, excuse me. January 9th is already passed, and Martin Luther King Day is the 19th. We've heard that district students are among those being recognized as part of the tribute to the late Dr. King. The inauguration of President-elect Barack Obama on January 20 will be woven into history and social studies curriculum across our classrooms, across the district. Santa Barbara High School will present Music of the Night beginning January 29. It is a student-directed and produced Broadway review. And schools are gearing up for an incredible number of theater and performing arts events. I have 2 pages worth. I will not give them to you tonight. Let me just give you an idea of what we have ahead of us. We're updating details on our district homepage almost daily, and a sampling of the upcoming events includes, you may want to write some of these dates down, the District Honor Band on February 27, February 25. Dos Pueblos High School Jazz Festival on March 7. The District String Festival on March 9, and several exciting theater productions such as Pirates of Penzance, Annie, Oliver, Copacabana, Footloose, Man of La Mancha, a very, very busy spring performance season. And that ends tonight's superintendent's report.
Thank you. Sounds exciting. Do we have a student report this evening?
I believe we have Luz Cordova with us from Santa Barbara High School.
Hello, good evening. So for Santa Barbara High School, our latest has been had a dollar drive, which in the past we've raised money and given delivered presents for the holidays to preschools, but some rules changed, so we weren't allowed to do that this year. So we raised $1,500, and we divided the money to the Transition House, the Cottage Hospital kids, and T-Fire victims. And Santa Barbara itself, the students raised $3,000, and we divided that money for the 14 students who were affected of the T-Fire at our school. And we had mixed it up, which is pretty much activities that happened at campus 2 days in a row, and that's to get diversity going on our campus. And that was hosted by some of our counselors and teachers. Our virtual enterprise business class earned second place in the state, and now they're preparing to compete in New York the week before spring break. So they're preparing for that. And our coming dance will be February 7th. That's King of Hearts. And for sports, we have the girls volleyball who won CIF and ranked 19th in the nation. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cordova. It's great to hear what's going on at Santa Barbara High School. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that members would like to pull? Yes, Dr. Noel?
D3, D4, D14, D15, and D17.
Slow down, please.
D4, 15, D4, 14, 15, and 17. Most of them are questions having to do with the relationship between the items and the spending freeze. So
Okay.
probably be very brief, Mr. Smith will.
Well, I can tell you that anything was in process prior to January 13th, we allowed to go through. So the spending freeze memo just went out as of yesterday. So if things were already in motion, then we let them proceed.
I'll go, when it comes out, let's go through them very quickly.
Okay.
I don't know which ones we'll rip up now.
All right. Anybody else? I do want to pull the November 25th, 2008 minutes. Is there a motion?
I have some questions on D6.
So you want to pull D6?
I move to approve the remaining items.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Well, before we actually take the vote on that, you've pulled the elementary and secondary school library master plans. Normally, we won't address that till the end of the meeting. I'm fairly confident that that will pass, but I see that we have 6 of our 7 district librarians here. And I don't want, I'm not sure if Mr. Heron, if you'd like to have us address this immediately, if this is something quick, or if this is something that you needed to go over in more detail.
If they're here, I hope they're not just here to hear it passed. But I have a lot of questions. One of my main questions is it mandatory that be done tonight? Is there a time element involved in it?
Maybe Ms. Sawaskian can address that.
Not necessarily a time limit. We normally just pass it about this time of year and put them all together. This is the first time we've actually put on a consent agenda because in years past we've done larger presentations, and at this point the plans are developed and they just change slightly every year. So there's not a lot of difference in them.
My main question is, maybe it's more general, is what happens to it? Because there's things in there that ask for us to do certain things. And so my question is, if we pass it, does that mean we're going to do them? Does that mean they come back later with requests? I mean, there's a $5 in the elementary district. You know, I guess a year ago they got $10 a student. It was reduced to $5. Now they're asking that it go back to 10. And so I don't know how those things play out. You know, I don't want to see a plan sitting on a shelf.
Those are good questions. And what the library plans are built around are templates that come from the state and other, I suppose, even national library, but standards that they use. And so they're reflecting our current programs against that. And so they're showing what would be, you know, the best plan going, knowing full well that, especially in the budget situation we're in, that kind of thing might not necessarily happen. But the plan is there so that if and when funds ever become available, or if there's a prioritization, they know which goals and which pieces they can add in.
Okay.
So
And-
it's not something that the board's held, by passing this, it's not held accountable for fulfilling those allocations.
And so a follow-up to that would be, what's the impression we're giving to the librarians when we pass it? Do they know that we're not really going to do all the things that are in there?
Yes.
You know, some things in there, like the emphasis in both on using the portal and using SBCEO's educational people to help you. That's been it's been interesting to me because I know that that's not taking place. And so I would just urge you to take advantage of that and use it. But that answers my questions.
Okay, thank you. I know any one of the librarians would answer questions too.
Would you, can
Tonight
we,
or in email or something.
can we go ahead and include D6 then on the
Yes.
consent list? All right,
Okay, so I'll include that in my motion.
all right. And Mrs. Deacon, you'll include that in
Yes.
your second? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda, less the items that were pulled, has passed unanimously. And thank you so much. The master plans look wonderful. They look fantastic, and I only wish that we could implement every single thing that's on
And
them.
who are the librarians? I'd love to.
Would you? Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And with that, we will move on to our action agenda. Item E1, approval of Santa Barbara School District's independent audit report for the period ending June 30th, 2008.
And Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will introduce the audit report.
We're required by California Ed Code to have an independent audit of our financials every year, and that audit must be completed and submitted to the state controller by December 15th for the subsequent the prior fiscal year. Brian Ruff is here from the firm of Babernick, Trine and Day Company, and he was the lead on our audit, and he's here to present the independent audit for 0708.
Thank you, Eric. Excuse my voice, I have a bit of a cold. This is my 4th year doing the audit for the district, and we've had our ups and downs. It's been a challenge at times, and I would say without question this past year's audit was the smoothest by far. As you can tell, the audit actually made it to the state timely this year, so that's a major accomplishment. Just to summarize the audit, I put this page up typically every year, obviously for the reason, the title, Summary of Auditor's Results. Basically gives you a snapshot of what's in the report there. The first section is our opinion on the financial statements. The district received a clean or unqualified opinion this year. There were a couple items that we indicated in the report as significant deficiencies, but there are action plans in place to correct those. And I would highlight that there are far fewer deficiencies this year as there have been in the past, by far. I think numbers around 20 fewer. In the area of federal awards, you'll see the federal awards that we reviewed this year, areas of Title I, Special Education, National School Lunch. Clean opinion this year. I think that's the first time in the 4 years that I've done the audit. And finally, in the area of state awards, there was one hiccup. It was on the public hearings for state instructional materials. That was a year ago, and I understand that in this year's, this fiscal year, that's been corrected, so you guys have already implemented that comment. So that should satisfy the state. Again, this is my last year. It's been a privilege to work with the district, and good luck to you guys.
Thank you so much, and I want to note, this is your last year because we're switching auditing firms, sort of as a best practices model, but you've done tremendous work, so thank you. And board members, do you have questions? Dr. Noel?
I'm interested in some of these findings. Maybe you can explain what it means to say that there was significant deficiencies identified but not considered to be material weaknesses. And I see that in several places.
Okay, so specifically, you're referring to the terminology distinguishing between
Well, it seems to be a box that
significant.
you check.
I'm sorry?
It seems, the choices are material weakness identified or what I just quoted. And I'm happy that I don't see any material weaknesses
Correct.
identified.
Correct.
I'm asking, what does it mean to have the lesser category?
Okay. That's a fair question. A material weakness would significantly affect the audit opinion itself. The significant deficiency in and of itself does not relate to the audit opinion. It doesn't qualify the opinion per se. Material weakness would mean, say, the district has no budget process in place and there is no way of knowing what your financial condition is. That could be an example of a material weakness that could severely jeopardize the district.
Okay. Thank you. Another big thing, I just went through the findings and I see, what do you call it, finding budget monitoring, the cafeteria fund in any event. Cafeteria fund of the district continues to incur operating losses. The district transferred $372,000 during 2007 and 2008 to cover a portion of the cafeteria fund operating deficit. I don't quite understand. If that's only a portion, what's the total?
We just reported on what was transferred from other funds to backfill the cafeteria funds in of themselves.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the other portions of that might be.
It would all be the cafeteria fund. You're just identifying the amount of the interfund transfer or the encroachment on the unrestricted general
That's
fund.
correct, absolutely.
That's the amount that had to come out of the general fund.
Absolutely.
To cover the losses in the cafeteria fund.
Right.
It's gone up since the last time we looked at it.
I think it hovered around the 300s in most of the interims, and I think it went up maybe 25,000 by year end, but it was
Well, I'm
pretty
thinking
close to the
it was down
projection.
under $100,000.
I'm not sure
ago,
it's
wasn't
ever
it?
been that low,
Oh, okay.
but I could go back and
Now-
report back on that.
And it says we should do, and I'm looking here, the district's response. Mr. Smith, perhaps you could explain that a little bit. What are we doing about it, any effect?
I'll have to look at the page.
The page is 83.
I think there's a couple of things we're doing. We went with point of sale software in all the secondary student stores. So now we're capturing reimbursable meals. We've implemented universal breakfast at several school sites in the elementary, which also has increased our participation. We're beefing up our infrastructure to increase our capacity to serve, and as you see in the agenda, there's an infrastructure grant we're getting from Orphala, and we're actually pursuing another one that's even more significant. So we're doing a variety of things. However, I would state that at the same time we're doing a variety of things, the state and federal government is cutting our funding at the same time. So it's going to be, we could do everything and still end up having a 300,000 some odd contribution, but it's not because we haven't done everything we're supposed to do.
Yeah. I'm glad you clarified, because one of my consent items I pulled with the Orphala Foundation, does that go against this?
No, that's actually additional revenue. It'll be additional revenue that's deposited into the cafeteria fund for those specified purposes in the grant.
So that makes us look better.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, okay, well, that's my question about.
Well, I won't say it will reduce that amount, because here's the issue. It's like receiving a categorical where it has to be spent on that purpose. It can't be used for any operating purpose in the cafeteria fund, so it would not decrease the interfund transfer.
It would not cut back.
Would not decrease the interfund transfer, but it'll
the
give us
approach.
greater capacity to serve.
Bottom line on that for me is, does the board need to consider raising the prices?
Well, we did raise the prices last year.
Again.
Well, I think we'll be bringing forward a whole new, what I'm going to call a fiscal solvency plan, because the recovery was ostensibly complete. I mean, you don't end the year with a 8.58% reserve and call it a fiscal recovery, but what we need to talk about is sustainability now, and that might be one of the items that's embedded in that plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments, Dr. Noel? Right, Mrs. Deacon?
Just give
Oh,
me
wait.
1 second.
Sorry.
Well, I note that that you separate out the reserve position of the two districts.
Correct.
And while we combine that I think it's noteworthy that the elementary district is only 2.56% reserve, a little shy of its 3%, while the combined districts are in a good position, but there's still a problem of deficit spending in the elementary district, I guess.
Yeah, there is an issue. If you break the districts apart, you'll see that there's a significant structural deficit in the elementary. And I mean, we could get into the reasons why. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you know, you have a smaller revenue limit per ADA. You've got, you know, small school sites that operate, and we have multiple. I mean, there's a whole variety of reasons that make the elementary expensive, as opposed to the secondary district, where basically we have a much higher revenue limit. And not only do we have a much higher revenue limit per ADA, but whenever we basically implement cuts or cuts that are joint, the high school district gets 70% of that benefit, and so there's greater economies of scale. So whenever we cut things, both in the secondary district and also joint, which is 70%, it's easier to get out of a fix quicker in the secondary district because of those reasons. And the elementary is a little bit more difficult.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rupp. Been good working with you all these years.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Brian.
Mrs. Deacon?
Mr. Smith, I just had a quick follow-up on the cafeteria question. Is this typical across districts that quite often cafeterias are not able to pay for themselves?
Yeah, it's about, I mean, it used to be a lot of districts had cafeteria funds that ran in the red. I would say it's about 50-50, although I'm seeing more go back to this because of the economic difficulties we're dealing with. But, you know, ideally you'd get to a point where basically, you know, the cafeteria fund's running in the black, and then you're charging your indirect costs, and it actually means something. It's actually benefiting the district. We charge indirect costs because we want to basically reflect the true cost of operating the program, but that's really embedded in that encroachment, right? We're getting no benefit. So at the point that, you know, the cafeteria fund actually makes money, then the general fund would get a real benefit.
Anything else, Mrs. Deacon? Any other board members? Mr. Herron? I just had a quick comment. First of all, I mean, I don't know about the rest of the board members that have had longer-term experience, but when I saw that there were only 3 audit findings, I almost fell out of my chair. So congratulations to Business Services. That is really, we've made huge leaps in progress this year, so thank you, Mr. Smith and your staff. One thing I noted, though, was that this time there were these sort of what you called opportunities for strengthening internal controls at the end. And the findings weren't really official findings, but some of them were official findings in previous audits.
Correct.
So can you talk about why they're not official this time?
Sure. The audit industry went through a change a year ago with terminologies and what we considered to be in previous years reportable conditions. Now they have lined out different types and categories of issues, such as material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and any management letter or internal control type comments that are insignificant to the financial statement. So what we deem to be significant, we see as having a potential effect on your financial statement in a material matter. Those minor items that you see in the management letter, which typically a management letter is not included in a bound report, however the state controller requires it, so you'll see that in your audit report. Those items most oftentimes are in the student body funds or in site cash collections, or those areas where there are some really minor type transaction activities that can be easily corrected and don't have a material effect on the financials.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith?
I would just like to add one thing. You know, obviously the thing that I always look at is how we did versus prior year findings and whether we eradicated most of them. And then the other thing Brian was talking about is that, you know, it's an unqualified opinion relative to their ability to, you know, what's the terminology? Substantiate in a fair way that, you know, our financials are accurate. But we'd like to get to a point where we had an unqualified opinion with no findings, and that's part of our continuous improvement effort, and that would be kind of the pinnacle if we could ever get to that point, which will make it especially challenging given that we're changing audit firms, and every audit firm does things a little bit differently, so.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, we need a motion on this.
I'll move to approve the independent audit report for the period ending June 30th, 2008.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And I'd like to also thank you, Mr. Ruff, for the work that you've done for the district. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and we move on to E2, approval of independent evaluation and analysis of special education and the review of plans for special education.
Well, as you know, I'm determined to fix our problems in special education. My role as a superintendent, my own background in special education, and the fact that I'm a parent of a child with a learning disability all propel me to go beyond just fixing the problems and really building a vision of services for our children at the highest level. We have dedicated staff as well as determined parents. I've been very encouraged by the meetings that we've had with both staff and parents, and together I believe we will achieve a program that will move our children to higher levels. I formulated a plan at the end of November. I published it and I brought it to the board at the December 9 meeting. There's a copy in the agenda. We're following up on each of the items that was described in that plan. For example, the board approved the appointment of interim co-directors Rick Nargi and Alan Hilton just tonight to see us through the end of this school year. The board also gave direction to pursue an independent evaluation and analysis. I contacted 6 different firms. Some of them are more responsive than others. I went through a lengthy process of talking to, in fact, these 2 items, looking for an interim director, getting recommendations from various people who had significant experience, for example, retired SELPA directors, and asking for firms that would do a good job, really went hand in hand. But I contacted various agencies regarding the possibility of conducting an independent evaluation and analysis of special education in our districts. I specifically requested a number of things, that the evaluation include special education procedures, our administrative organization, appropriate assignment of teachers and aides, training and support for teachers, effective clerical program specialists and administrative staffing, the configuration of stable top administrative position or positions, including responsibilities and accountability and examination of the role of attorneys, and class inclusion models. I also specified that the analysis would consider problems that we have had in the past in special education, and would include input from both parents and from staff. After our board discussion, I went back to the firms and I included some other items at the board's direction. I included, for example, that the analysis would consider input from parent, staff, and former employees. I also included that we would specifically want them to look at the delivery of services, at partnerships and communication with parents, at response to intervention and pyramid of interventions, and those 2 things can conceptually be considered in the same area, but could be separated as well. I also, in the initial request, requested an early recommendation on how to staff our top administrative positions. We've had too many directors. They have come to us without direct experience as a director, so that we're anticipating how they will be able to perform as a director. But we want to be able to advertise for a permanent administrative position at the top level in special education during a prime spring period, and we would need that recommendation from this organization earlier. Proposals came in, and you have the proposals. They're listed alphabetically. Proposals came in from 4 organizations before the board agenda went out. One of the firms that was quite responsive was FCMAT, the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team. You have their proposal. Another was School Innovations and Advocacy. I was concerned about the scope of work not being fully shown. Therefore, you have on the dais an additional contract from School Innovations and Advocacy. It's marked E2, and it has information about the scope of work shown in that contract. They chose to send us a description of the scope of work in the form of a contract.
Is that available for the public?
Oh, yes, it is. It's on the side table. There are about 15 copies. It's marked E2. You also have a proposal from School Services of California. They were also particularly responsive, got back to us right away. And you have a proposal from Total School Solutions. You may recall in our discussion, I said that we had these firms who had responded to us already, and we were expecting proposals from them. And Dr. Noel also suggested that we go to Total Education Solutions. That is also attached to the same item. So you have actually 2 different attachments there. One is the additional information from School Innovations and Advocacy, and also stapled to that is the Total School Solutions proposal. That was not available at the time the board agenda went out, and I'm sorry that you're having to look at it just now.
Dr. Service, can I just...
You want to take a brief break in order to do that. Yes.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, because we used the term Total School Solutions and Total Education Solutions. I just want to...
They are 2 separate firms.
Those are 2 separate firms,
Yes.
okay.
You have Total School Solutions in your packet, and the one that came to you tonight is Total Education Solutions.
Would the board care to take a 5-minute break to
I'd
read
like to.
through these, or Dr. Noel?
Well, I wanted to ask about, I had mentioned at an earlier board meeting that this group that did the evaluation in Santa Monica, Malibu, Lou Barber Associates, were you able to reach them at all?
I didn't remember that from an earlier board meeting. I did receive from you this last Wednesday a report
Yeah, I
on
got that from
analysis
some
that
parents,
they did.
actually, and I
Yes.
did send you that, yeah. Their report to the Malibu, Santa Monica Malibu District.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, I just followed up on Total Education Solutions.
Yeah.
That was the one I heard from you.
yeah. Well, I had mentioned it at a board meeting, but I probably should have put it in the
If you
email.
had, I am terribly sorry. I
that's
would
okay.
have gone to them because I was going all over the state talking to everyone.
Yeah.
In fact, I was quite impressed with what they had done. Although I will say that I did some background, and it took them 1 year and 3 months and cost $78,000 plus expenses in order to do it. Yes.
Would the board care to take a 5-minute break to be able to read through this information, or has everybody already read through it?
Well, I'm wondering, Madam President, whether we might get a little more time on this, because I'd like to do more than 5 minutes when I look at a proposal for multiple thousands of dollars.
Is there any objection to it?
And I like to be able to get on the internet and read about the outfit and try to get resumes and things like that.
So you want to pull this item?
I'd like to postpone this to the
Or
next
postpone a
possible
decision?
meeting.
Obviously, we could still talk about it. I'm just,
Yeah. And perhaps we could see some work products from some of them. I do know that, well, we have the Barber work product, which was sent to me. Mr. Smith will, being a good FCMAT person, will recall that FCMAT publishes its reports. And I did look at some of the FCMAT special ed reports for Clovis and Evergreen School District, and it's really helpful to see their product.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and take public comment on this, and then we can have a discussion about whether or not we want to talk about what we already do know or explore more at a later meeting. So, public comment.
We have 3 requests for public comment, starting with Thomas Bream, followed by Sandy Shrove, followed by Jenny Kuhn. And we have 3 minutes each, and I'll give you a little nudge at 30 seconds.
I won't need 3 minutes. Thank you, Board, for allowing me to speak for a moment. I come to you as a father of a special needs student at Washington. I've been here a couple of times, and you're very familiar with my wife, I imagine. I wanted to thank the administration and the board for the positive changes that we see, that the things that you spoke about tonight, and especially you, Dr. Sarvis. I really do appreciate, as a father of a special needs son, the consideration that you're showing and the action that you're putting forth to make this plan happen. I get some really, I'm not as involved with this as my wife is, so I'm not in it daily as she is, but I get lots of positive feedback from her, and I appreciate that, so thank you. But I do want to say that my parting comment is there are lots of eyes on this process. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Sandy Shrove, followed by Jenny Kuhn.
Good evening. Just really quickly, we had some opportunity to review the proposals that Dr. Sarvis has received to date. And my concern as a parent was I didn't see strongly reflected in any of the proposals a review of special education philosophy, programming, the educational foundations upon which decision-making and policy should be driven. And many of these, most of them, nearly all of them, appeared to me, on my reading, to be more reflective of a review of fiscal and staffing considerations, which are significant and are clearly the primary purview of the board in decision-making. However, you know, that old adage, if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If all you have on your staff are accountants, every problem looks like a budget consideration. So I would encourage the board and administration in approaching these proposals to really read through and look at what's being proposed. Are they really digging underneath to see, do we have a clearly articulated, educationally sound, foundational philosophy of special education in this district? And if so, what is that? And is that being communicated to the people in the classroom, and is it being communicated to parents? Because unless we're all kind of functioning from the same set of expectations about what special education should mean for this district and its students, I don't think we're ever going to resolve the antagonism and that sense of us and them. We need to establish between the administration, the faculty, the staff, the parents, and the students a sense of collaboration, of working toward consensus for the benefit of the students at hand, rather than everybody kind of staking out a claim and trying to fight for your territory. And unfortunately, in this district, it has become too much of a staking out and not nearly enough of a collaborative, problem-solving, consensus-building endeavor. And as I read through those proposals, it just struck me that these proposals don't seem to me to be addressing that issue. And without that being considered, it's unlikely that any report is really going to come back with the recommendations that this district so dearly needs. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate any additional time and consideration that the board is willing to invest in maybe expanding the net, rewriting the call for proposals to be more clear about the kinds of things we want included, the questions that need to be asked, so that the scope of the report is appropriate and we receive the information that we need from this district. The other piece is I did note there wasn't a lot of information about how much time would be spent interviewing.
5 seconds, I'm sorry.
Thank you. One proposal mentioned 1 day. That's inadequate amount of time to interview parents, faculty, staff, and other stakeholders. More time needs to be spent. People need to have time to really convey their needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think we all appreciate the input you've given us and the email we have from you with information. So anybody who wants to email us with information, it's more than welcome, and we love it. Thank you. Jenny Kuhn.
I too would like to say thank you very much for all your attention to this issue, and I'm really excited by your report, Dr. Sarvis, and I know Robin's been working really hard too, and you've done quite a few things on your proposal. You've met with us. I met with you the last day of school. We brainstormed on lots of suggestions, so thank you very much. You have the substitute policy in play now. So I think we're on our way. I'm really excited, and I'm excited that you've researched this independent evaluation aspect of the revamping. I was really excited when Sandy sent out this document on the Santa Monica Malibu United School District Special Education Program Executive Summary prepared by Lou Barber and Associates, and I'd really suggest that you get a proposal from them before you make a decision, because reading over this, and it's quite extensive and it's going to take a little bit of time, there's so many similar issues in Santa Barbara that Santa Monica's had. So again, if we can collaborate with the schools and the district together, come up with a really sound special ed philosophy and implement these programs that are out there to make it successful for the special ed kids and the regular kids, that's going to be really exciting. So anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before we go to board comments, I just want a quick question for Dr. Sarvis. What sort of effect does delaying action have on sort of the long-term plans? And maybe you also want to comment on the fact that we have appointed co-interim directors.
We will have directors on board soon, and that should carry us through the end of this year in terms of just operations, functions and operations. In order to get direction for the future, I'm particularly concerned time-wise about this going out for spring hiring. Normally, I would want within a couple of weeks to have their recommendations brought forward to the board. For example, if they were to recommend that that we bring in a director at a higher level position, we have a salary schedule, we have a job description, we would need to bring that to the board, we would need to get the board's approval to that, and what I was hoping to do was to go out to advertise by the middle of February. We could delay that, although I really wanted that middle of February through early April period, so that you have about 7 weeks, about 8 weeks. People who are out there can really consider it. We can go out and we can start beating the bushes. I often go out to staff, and I often say, and it would be parents in this case, that we find some of our best people who are already connected to our community through relatives and friends who know somebody who's particularly good. But that does take time to do. Just putting an ad in the state publication is the primary vehicle for that, but we found that keeping that ad open for a reasonable period of time is more important than just getting it in and closing it as soon as we can. So I'm particularly concerned about that point. The review could take longer. The rest of the review could take 2 months. I mean, we could easily delay the start of the rest of the review, but I'd like to get going with this part of it.
All right, board discussion. Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I just listening to these various ideas, and if I understand correctly, now we've got 2 interim consultants, directors, okay? One of whom will be here Tuesday, you said, right?
This next Tuesday, yes.
See, all right. Why I mention that is because I look at these proposals. I read that Barber report. It's long and it's expensive. But boy, it's sure full of ideas. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice to get Mr. Hilton, the interim director who starts Tuesday, to look this stuff over? Two things. What looks like the best vendor? Second thing, what are the terms of the contract? Because that's where we're going to basically define the work product. And that's just, for me, that's a little big, overwhelming thing to do right now, especially, I'm very much interested in this proposal that you just handed us from Total Education Solutions, simply because I'm a little familiar with that firm, and they have a really sterling reputation as a provider of special ed services. How they are at this, I don't know, what their track record is about doing research and studies, I don't know. I'd love to see some of their product. But anyway, those are some thoughts I had.
Mr. Herron?
Yes. For the public and the people in the audience, can you just briefly talk about the two special, temporary special ed people we've hired, what their background is, who they are? Because they don't know that. They know them by name now, but they don't know who they are and what they're expected to do.
That's good, and since we're also agendized to review the plans for special education, and that is one of the items, then I can do that. That's good. Thank you. Alan Hilton is retired SELPA director. He was in San Luis Obispo County as the SELPA director, and I've talked to the county superintendent. I've talked to a number of other people in that area. He has also served in interim positions, helping other school districts. I've received wonderful reviews on his abilities. Rick Nargi is the retired special education director from Ventura Unified. Rick retired just this last year. He has a stellar reputation. He's very much a people person. When I asked him for his resume, he said, well, no, I'm not sure if I have the numbers right, but he said, well, gosh, I think it was school psychologist, and then I became director of special education. I was director of special education for 24 years, something like that. So this is a lifetime activity for him. Now, he will not be available, but when he does come in March, he will not be available immediately, but when he does come in March, the two of them will serve co-jointly, and we will be meeting to assign the responsibilities and determine who takes on which tasks. We have a lot of things that need to get done yet this year.
Mrs. Deacon?
As much as I share the urgency about making this decision, I actually feel pretty rushed in making it, and I think it might be appropriate to take a little bit longer to go back to a few of these companies who've provided us with proposals and ask them to elaborate on this issue about parental involvement, enhanced communication, because I agree that many of the proposals really focused on saving money, which is a nice byproduct, but it's not what's really driving us at this point, I think, per se. So I don't know how long it would take to go back and ask them to elaborate, to perhaps pursue an additional company as well.
Well, perhaps we could narrow the field here, and if I do pursue an additional company, I'd be happy to do that, but perhaps we could narrow the field with these proposals.
I'd be fine with that.
Any other board comment here?
I just wanted to raise the issue from a member of the public that there's also the question of whether the audit or the review would recommend that we have a separate position for elementary and secondary, and whether that would be something that we would need to consider in terms of the timing.
Mr. Herron?
I'm sorry, I was going to say, my own personal concern is I absolutely agree that the timing of of our ad placements and how long, et cetera, are really crucial. At the same time, I'm concerned that we don't want to leave out possible firms that could provide a really good product. But I hope that if we do decide to extend this, that we make it for the shortest possible period so that we can get this out. Because I want to make it clear, I'm not sure if it's unclear or not, but that what we're trying to do is get the response back in time to then go out based on what the response is. But we have to give the firm enough time to get us that response and still be early enough in the process that we can have a good pool of applicants. So that's my concern, is if we do decide to extend it, which it sounds like to me like we're probably headed in that direction, that we need to make sure we're doing it for a very minimal amount of time. And I'm not sure what that means for companies that haven't yet submitted a proposal. If we say, well, okay, we're going to postpone it for 2 weeks till our next meeting, is that going to be enough time for them to get us a proposal, et cetera? But I want us to get on this as quickly as we can.
Mr. Herron?
Yes, my comments are pretty much like some of yours. I don't think there's anywhere near enough interviews with parents, teachers, staff. They all are basically one day, and I think one's not even one day, if we want them. I don't think they understood the nature of our problems. They're functional, they're by the book, they're very bureaucratic, they're money-oriented in some cases. I didn't see them looking at us and hearing what we were saying and coming back with proposals to meet our needs. I'll just leave it at that. So I know we have time constraints, but in addition, again, having not done this before, I would appreciate something from you, Dr. Sarvis, listing in your view what the pros and cons are of each of the proposals. It would give us a better starting point than having to look at them and come up with them, because I depend upon you to give us some guidance. We don't have to take it, but I'd like you to give it to us. I'd like to have these. Here's the pros of this. Here's the cons of this, and sort of a comparison chart of how they compare to each other. You can't just compare money, because the $78,000 one at the end may be the very best one. It sure has a lot more things in it than what the others do. And as I said last week, give us their best shot. I don't think these companies gave us their best shot.
And I'll chime in with Mrs. Shove distributed to all of us a list of questions that were used. Well, I think that they are ones that parents here also came up with, but a lot of them are ones that were touched on in the Santa Monica Malibu review. And some of the things are sort of worded differently, but are on the current scope, but a few things are not, and it is exactly what she was touching on when she made public comment. And so it would be great to be able to go back to ones that have given us quotes and say, actually, we really want this to be a focus also. Any other board comment? Dr. Noel?
It's like a question, because I think very highly of FCMET in general, and I like the institutional arrangement. I have a lot of confidence in Anthony Bridges, his name is high up on that list of supervisors. But to me, it's very managerial and budget oriented, as many of you have said. I really want to ask Mr. Smith and Dr. Sarvis, would it make any sense at all to have them do a piece of this and have a more special education group do the programmatic part? They do the fiscal part? They do the cost containment part?
Well, yes. In fact, when I went back to them, I said, this is really a programmatic review. We're going to have a report from the county on finance, and we may want to take up finance at a later point. And they said, well, we're just used to doing finance. We do finance anyway, so we'd throw that in. And we fully understand that this is programmatic, and that you want us to look at relationships. You want us to look at how people are assigned and deployed, and how well things are working, how smoothly things are working. I will say that in my talking with the new interim directors, in my talking with, in fact, I gave Bob Farron a call, Southwest SELPA director, and talked to him about some of these proposals. Yeah. And this is really an answer to a couple of questions. I think the most important feature in each of these is who does the review. their background, their expertise in special education. I saw some of these as being conducted by business people. In fact, some of them were the same business people that conducted other evaluations for us. I saw some of these as simply generic. They could have sent it out to any school district. It would have looked the same. I didn't see anything that spoke to us. I did see in just one of these some names that were significant, because when I went looking for interim directors, I kept hearing these same names as people who would do a great job as an interim director. And those are Joanne Murphy and Ann Stone, who are in the FCMAT proposal. And when I contacted them, then they both said, well, you know, my time's really limited because I'm doing special education reviews, and I've got one coming up this spring, and I may have some others. After I talked to them and sort of checked them off of my list of potential interim directors, their names still kept coming up. When I talked to Bob Farron, their names came up. So I was particularly impressed with that aspect of one proposal.
Dr. Noel?
I'm sorry. Along a similar vein, I tried to look these names up, and a lot of them you couldn't find any resumes or anything. I found something about the couple of FCMAT people, where they are, one's on the faculty of a particular college and so on. I was rather surprised. The school services proposal, it names one special ed person, and that person, the best I could tell, was an administrator, like a personnel administrator at Travis Unified, and had taught special ed. And I shouldn't say that with disdain, and had taught special ed. But that seems to me not the qualification we're looking for here. But on those grounds, I would be willing to discard the school services one right now and not ask for more information. But I don't want to be premature on that.
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, I actually was going to say something very similar, because that particular proposal seemed to me to be pretty thin in terms of expertise in the area we're looking for. And because it sounds like we want to move quickly on this, winnowing down the numbers that we go back to makes sense, because hopefully that would expedite things. So I would say I would definitely stay with the FCMAT. I was impressed with the fact they broke out the search for the director separately. To me, that was insightful, because I think while the two programmatic pieces are related, I also think that shows, you know, some expertise in terms of looking at how we might go about hiring that person. So I would definitely stay with FCMAT. I don't know what other folks thought about the school innovations and advocacy proposal.
Mr. Herron?
On the school innovations and advocacy, I basically said their emphasis is not important to us. I said it doesn't appear like there's any on-site interviews, and they talk about cost savings, and if they want to come talk to us, we got to pay them to come talk to us extra. On that basis alone, I would like to eliminate them. Which one?
And I would agree with that, even with the new information we got. You can read it through really quickly. There's just not a lot there. So I think those two.
Yeah, to me, they're
Mrs. Cordero?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
To me, their major positive was that they were relatively inexpensive, but it seemed in reading the proposal, you could kind of figure out why, because they didn't seem to be doing nearly as thorough an analysis as certainly as FCMAT had presented. So I would be willing to eliminate SIA and school services.
All right. Dr. Noel?
Is it out of the question for someone to talk to Barbara and Associates? Would it be too late?
Here's what I think I'm hearing from you, is that I would go back to FCMAT, Well, let me go back to my theme. I think who does this is so important that there were really only two proposals here that had the expertise that I felt was appropriate, and that was FICMAT and Total Education Solutions. But what I'm hearing from you is that I would go back to a couple of these organizations and go to Lou Barber and Associates, and on the same basis, see what they would be willing to do for us, and see how quickly they could deliver that.
All right.
But frankly, I would take Total School Solutions off the list as well.
Any comments on Total School Solutions?
Here, here.
You're ready to take that one off the
Doc-
list also?
Dr.
That means
Sarvis,
agree.
you said you wanted to take them off the list?
Yeah.
Total School Solutions.
Because of their, the details, or because of the cost, or a combination of both?
A comment, well, no, it wasn't based on cost, it was based on the study, on who was involved and what they were offering us.
Any objections?
But we're talking total
Um,
school solutions,
right.
not total education
Right.
solutions.
Correct.
And-
Mrs.
Okay.
So I would contact FICMAT, Total Education Solutions, and Lou Barber and Associates.
Mrs. Deacon, is that acceptable?
That aligns with what I was going to say,
All right.
too.
Anybody have a problem with that?
I just had one additional
Mrs.
question, I'm
Cordero?
sorry. When we went back, for example, innovations, the school innovations and advocacy
Yes.
sent us some additional information. Was Total School Solutions approached about sending us additional information, or no? Yeah, I mean, did they have the opportunity to send more if they wanted to?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then I have no objections to taking them off the list as well.
All right. Well, I think we've given some direction on what to do next on E2.
May I ask one
Yes,
last
Dr.
question?
Noel.
Would there be an opportunity for us to submit questions to add to the list of the things that you talked to them about, Dr. Sarvis?
There certainly would. However, I wanted to call Lou Barber and Associates tomorrow morning, so.
I have them in writing at home.
Could you do it tomorrow?
I'll email you at
Okay.
7 in
great.
the morning.
Great, thank you.
So this needs to come back to us.
It will come back at our next meeting.
January
the January
20
27th meeting.
27th.
And along with that, I think it should be, I should set the expectation that whoever we choose would be available to come to us at our first meeting in February and address specifically the issue of how we staff our top administrative position.
All right. Thank you.
I'd
and
like
we'll-
to say one thing which is
Yes.
not content. I'd like to commend Dr. Sarvis, who has shown a willingness to keep an open mind and to talk to people. I really appreciate that you called the people I suggested. I don't know whether you were as impressed as I was, but I got good information from them, and it was very nice to hear that you were willing to do that. Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Noel. And Mr. Herron?
Yes, I'd also like to comment on the parent meeting we had at McKinley School recently. You both did a great job in moderating that, and I felt that people there had a chance to really tell you what was on their minds, and you obviously were listening too, so I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. All right. We will now move on to item E3, renewal of pre-internship permit in social studies alternative education setting. Dr.
Well,
Robertson.
this is one of those items that the CDE insists be done in open session. And with that, Dr. Christine Robertson will make the presentation.
This is one of my favorite topics. The CTC has eliminated emergency credentials. One of the credentials that bridges the gap that used to be provided by the emergency credentials is called a Provisional Internship Permit, or PIP. It allows us to fill an immediate staffing need by hiring a teacher who has not yet completed their subject matter exam. We thought we had submitted this proposal in August and have not been able to find it on the board list, so for approval. So we are resubmitting it and actually asking that this resubmittal is for renewing Clarence Banks, PIP. Clarence is also known as Umwe. Many of you may be familiar with that name. And he works extensively with La Cuesta Continuation High School and has done so for the last couple of years, either as a substitute, student teaching, a PIP teacher for us. He is pursuing a single subject in social science and has not completed his subject matter exam. He will be taking that exam in January, sometime towards the end of the month, and upon passing that exam, he will have his single subject teaching credential in social science. Until that time, I'm asking that the Board of Education approve the renewal of the pre-internship permit in social studies for Clarence Banks.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move to approve the pre-internship permit in social studies and alternative education setting for Umwe Banks.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're moving on to item E4, board action on a supplemental hearing, student expulsion case number 0809-22.
In case 0809-22, actually, I'm going to defer on that one. I'm not
Make the motion.
ready to make a motion on that.
Anybody
I
else ready to
apologize.
make a motion? Mrs. Deacon.
I'll give it a try. Okay, on student expulsion case number 0809-22, I move that we suspend the expulsion and direct the student to attend the community day school at La Colina.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Mr. Herron?
We have the right one?
Yep.
I approve. Yes.
The motion carries 4-1. Dr. Noel seconded it. Okay, now we're moving on to item E5, expulsion case numbers 0809-14, -17, -18, and -20.
In case 0809-14, I move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
In case 0809-17, I move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously.
In case 0809-18, I move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel with the stipulation that the student be sent to CDS.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously.
In case 0809-20, move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel for a suspended expulsion and stipulate that the student be directed to La Cuesta.
Is there a second? That is the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries unanimously. All right. It was Mrs. Deacon. And with that, we move on to our conference agenda. Break's coming up at 9 o'clock. And our cheery first topic is the report on proposed mid-year cuts in Governor's 0910 fiscal year budget. Take it away, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to try and do something a little different and see if I can do this from the dais here. Obviously, 18 months of budget battles are starting to wear down. My legs are getting kind of weak, so. The report's on the governor's 2009-2010 budget, but really it looks at an 18-month, time frame because of the governor and legislature's inability to deal with the current year budget issue. So when we develop our budget, the first milestone we look at is the governor's budget. That really guides us in the development of our school district's budget and basically is the industry standard in terms of setting the initial assumptions. These assumptions change due to the machinations of the legislative process and due to updated economic information released at the May revise. This year is a little bit different in the sense that they could also change due to another special session of the legislature and basically looking at what comes down relative to mid-year cuts. We're in uncharted waters. In an unprecedented move, the governor unveiled his education budget on December 31st, 2008, even though statutorily he wasn't required to do so until January 10. Early release was hoped to spur legislative action. Hasn't spurred anything. The big issue is the structural deficit at the state level. Over an 18-month period, we're looking at a $41.6 billion structural deficit. That's inclusive of a $2 billion reserve. You may remember a couple years ago when Prop 58 was passed, there was a couple of things that were voter approved there, and one of them was the establishment of what the governor calls a rainy day fund. So basically, that $2 billion reserve requirement increases that amount to $41.6 billion, and if it wasn't there, it'd be reduced by that amount. 75% of the shortfall is attributed to a collapse in state revenues, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The remaining 25% is attributed to higher caseloads. That's such thing as higher prison, higher, social service costs and things of that. And also due to the fact that for community colleges and revenue limit school districts, because of the mortgage crisis and its effect on housing and the decrease in assessed valuations, they have to backfill with state aid lost property taxes. How did we get here? I've updated this PowerPoint since last Friday or when I did it at Friends of Education, so there's some new and even more gloomy slides, and actually the numbers have been changed. Structural deficit has existed since 2001-2002. The legislature has used internal and external borrowing, gimmickry, inflated revenue, a variety of means to basically balance the budget in the past, but it was never truly balanced. So that structural deficit was basically masked or camouflaged and just rolled forward year after year. The nationwide economic crisis in housing and credit markets basically precipitated the collapse. It didn't cause it, but it was basically the smoking gun. It was the trigger. One of the issues that's problematic for the state, it's highly dependent on capital gains. So while state revenues trend upward, forecasting becomes difficult. One of the issues that's critical is that we're heavily dependent on a top-heavy personal income tax. And one of the things that I will show you here is that in 2000, this is basically capital gains in income. And if you look at the 2000 year, that's when the dot-com bubble busted. Well, what happened is we ramped up expenditures commensurate with revenue, and then we've been gimmicking our way out of that. And you can see where we are now in 2008, 2009, 2009, 2010. And you can see good years, right before the collapse of the, mortgage industry and the credit industry. And then you can see what's happened over the last, 18 months or so. One of the things that's symptomatic of organizations that basically spend more than the revenue they take in is you run out of cash. In a school district, what happens normally is you have cash resources such as trans, or you can borrow from other funds until you can align your expenditure pattern with your revenues. You straighten out those lines so they become one and the same, cash temporarily to meet payroll. Well, one of the issues here is that the state's used up all their gimmicks. They can't go to Wall Street and borrow because the nation's credit history is the second to last in the nation right now. Our credit rating is the second to last in the nation. They have no place to borrow from in terms of cash resources. even though they're doing such things as halting public works and using those cash resources for projects, some that would benefit our districts in terms of school facilities, bridges, highway construction, all that's come to a screeching halt because of the real threat that the state's going to run out of cash. State will probably defer cash payments and make others with IOUs. Constitutionally, they can't pay school districts with IOUs, but we've never been in a place where they've ran out of cash. So all bets are off. I like to say cash is king. One of the things that the state wants to do is to sell, similar to what's a tax and revenue anticipation note, it's called a revenue anticipation warrant, a RAW, in July of '09, and then pay it back, I believe, in fiscal year 2010-11. Well, one of the things that the state doesn't do is budget on a multi-year basis. I think the value of the RAW is about $5 billion. So you're going to see this line item come out of the 10-11 budget. And once again, we've deferred a big problem. State must have an approved budget and plausible repayment plan to gain Wall Street acceptance for the issuance of a RAW. That means you've got to have a budget that's approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. I'll talk about some of the other issues that are problematic. But remember, the RAW and also the securitization of the lottery, those issues are basically, they're embedded in the proposal and don't even deal with all the controversial issues relative to cuts and tax increases that everybody's talking about. But they're embedded in the foundation. Mid-year cuts. This is what we're looking at this year. Obviously, we never booked the 0.68 cost of living adjustment. We basically sequestered that amount because we thought it was going to be taken away from us. These are new figures now. Further reduction of K-12 revenue limits of $1.6 billion or 4.5%, roughly $315 per student in our district's about $4.3 million current year. That's different from what you saw on Friday. Higher general fund expenditures of $430 million to backfill K-12 property tax shortfalls. We talked about that. The decrease in property tax values and the fact that the state has a constitutional obligation to backfill. That's also the case with community college districts because we have a constitutional obligation under Prop 98 to fund K-14 education. We're looking at mid-year cuts in terms of workload cuts to CalWORKS, workload savings in general child care where basically it's undersubscribed, allocation of $619 million directly to local education agencies rather than the public transportation account. One of the things that's interesting is that because of the way we're funded under Prop 98 and the tests really look at growth or decline in per capita income and student enrollment on a statewide basis, well, you know what's happening in both of those. We're appropriated at about $7.9 billion over what the guarantee is. So basically they can make those amount of reductions to K-12 education without even, with still maintaining the Prop 98 guarantee. So there's no discussion about suspending Prop 98 because what's happening is the revenue base and student enrollment is falling like this. So when you had things ramped up, they can rebench things down, and they can do that in a way where they could say, hey, we didn't hurt K-12 education. We didn't have to suspend Prop 98. So one of the things that was done in earlier years is how they moved transportation expense out of K-12 education and had it paid for out of a mass transportation fund, which is essentially a gasoline tax fund to fund, road improvements and highways and stuff. But now, because of the over-appropriation, they can put that back in. So, obviously, savings of $55.5 million from unappropriate funds from various programs. That's what we normally refer to as Prop 98 reversionary accounts, where the funds weren't all used by local agencies and they reverted back to the state. Okay, as a means to address or mitigate these cuts in the current year, which are ongoing cuts, the governor is proposing flexibility. The first one is use of state categorical funds for any purpose after local public hearings. Basically, we can move those to the unrestricted side. There's a couple exceptions. QUIA is one, and also ACES, which is the after-school program. Those are off the table at this point, but everything else seems like it could happen. reduce the restricted maintenance account from 3% to 1%. As you recall, we budget 3% of our general funds for routine restricted maintenance pursuant to a covenant with the Office of Public School Construction in terms of receipt of those dollars for capital facilities. We say we're going to basically maintain those facilities. To reduce from 3 to 1 means that basically we would end up having to lay off staff in those areas, and I don't think that really gives us any flexibility. Suspension of the deferred maintenance match, we might be able to look at that in at least one of the districts because we have a significant ending balance. But once again, these are all gimmicks because unless they're given to you on perpetuity, you got to restore them at some time, right? And you're going to restore them at the same time in 10, 11 when that $5 billion hit to the state budget hits because the RAWs do. Reducing the reserve level from 3% to 1.5%. Well, once again, if you reduce it to that level, and that's how you're measured, is can you meet your current and subsequent 2-year obligations measured against the reserve level? If you reduce it for this year and next year, but it's ratcheted back up to the normal level in the third subsequent year, you tighten the belt, but you're going to have to restore it sooner or later, right? So we're going to be careful, you know, probably we'll do some things with flexibility in the categoricals. We basically, since the beginning of this year, have had hands-off policy on all restricted ending balances, knowing that we probably could move those to the unrestricted side. And our strategy will be twofold. One, looking at ongoing reductions, but also bolstering our reserves like we did last year. And the categorical funding shift will help us do that. We're a little bit more circumspect about the other issues because I think they're more gimmicky. So we'd really have to be, you know, take a careful eye to those and see what we think is appropriate. Obviously, I'm not in favor of reducing the reserve level, and I think the RRMA thing really doesn't help us. Okay, 9-10 budget. 152 million reduction in funding due to the projected decrease in K-12 students statewide. Remember, I'm talking about the Prop 98 minimum. It's been rebenched downward because of the decrease in per capita income and decrease in student enrollment. That's how they start to get there. Okay, but community college demand is up. So that's a caseload issue where they have to fund that. So that's a strain on the budget. That's an expense to them. No COLA estimated to be 5.02 for K-14 education. And an additional reduction in revenue limit of $1.1 billion, or about $154 per student, $2.1 million, and that's cumulative over the cut we take this year. Growth that's actually budgeted in here for K-12 adult ed, child nutrition, some charter school categorical block grants. Interesting phenomenon here, they're actually showing an increase in deferred maintenance. So it's implied they're going to fund deferred maintenance this year and next year, but they're going to let you to suspend the match. So the state will give you, because normally deferred maintenance is as a 50-50 program, matching share program, state's going to fund their apportionment, but they're going to allow us to suspend it. And since our funds in this district come out of the unrestricted general fund, in the elementary we might look at doing something like that. Secondary we can't do that because we don't have the ending balance. We don't have the fund balance. We would not be doing projects if that was the case. Once again, we see the shift of the public transportation account, more of the same. Okay, couple of things. Further deferral of $150 million in mandate settle-up funds. This was agreed to previously in a prior budget. There was actually a lawsuit that said basically the state can't continue to defer mandates, either basically pay up or you have to suspend them. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Under this proposal, they suspend almost every single mandate except 2, including collective bargaining. I don't see that happening. Elimination of the high priority school grants. And then also the issue with replacing lottery revenues, because lottery is now going to be secured to issue debt against it. It's a mess. 9-10, there was a mandated cost reimbursement settlement for special ed. We'll start getting those dollars here. It's about $200,000 for us per year, so it's something. Under court order, they have to pay that. And then here I'm talking about the mandated cost reimbursements that basically, under court order, they either have to pay or they have to suspend. They cannot defer payment of those mandates any longer. So this will be an interesting thing to watch. 9-10 flexibility, the same flexibility mechanisms that were proposed in 8-9. Okay, this is an interesting graph because this shows you this shows you in 8-9 what the funded revenue limit was, and then it shows you the cost of living adjustment that we did not receive but we were entitled to. Then it shows you the cut of the 4.65, and then when you in 8-9, and then in 9-10 it shows you the funded with the 8-9 cut of 4.56. Is that 4.56? I can't see from here. Plus the 9-10 cut of 2.5%. Remember, those are cumulative. Okay, and those are over baseline. And then it shows you what we're going to forego in terms of COLA for 8-9 and 9-10. Statutory COLA is 5.66. If it was funded in 8-9, 5.02 in 9-10. So cumulatively, it's about 16.64 if you wanted to look at that way. I know we always have people say, well, hey, is that a real cut or is that money you didn't get? Well, this shows you both. This shows you the real cut over the baseline between 8-9 and 9-10, and it shows you money that we forwent, is that a word? in 8-9 and 9-10. Pretty interesting. So with the governor's proposal, what could go wrong? Voters may not approve the lottery proposal or no acceptance on Wall Street. State may not be able to sell the raw or might be challenged under Prop 58. Prop 58 did a couple of things. It not only established that rainy day fund, but also said the state could not borrow for operational purposes. Well, that's exactly what they're doing. So they're going to have to figure out a workaround to get that done. Okay, so our next steps. Governor's proposal is jumping off point. We have something to react to. Before we've seen myriad of proposals, but it's not industry standard to react to anything until we have the first milestone, and that's basically the governor's budget, because we never had any action out of the extraordinary sessions that preceded it. We hope to have mid-year action only in the sense that we'd have some certainty. Right now, the thing that's killing us is the uncertainty. We've seen a lot of different, it's a dynamic process. You saw different figures on Friday than I had today. We need to really quantify how big the cut is this year and next year and then figure it out. So obviously the financial estimates will be revised in May, and budget adopted in June, July, August, who knows when. So that's my presentation for tonight, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, at least the ones I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The situation in Sacramento is ridiculous, and we can laugh about it tonight, but unfortunately, we're not going to be laughing in just a couple of months. And so it's really very disheartening to hear all this news. Board members, comments and questions?
I can't even laugh out loud.
Yes.
I think one of the things I would just like to add is that obviously this was none of our making here. I mean, we dealt with our issues last year, we've recovered, but to sustain it is really going to require, ingenuity on, the part of our staff and leadership on part of the superintendent and the board, and we're going to have to go through the process again. And it's really frustrating that, the inability of the legislature to govern is basically falling at the feet of local school boards. And so we will engage in a collaborative process like we did last year. We'll be bringing back a board item that basically identifies the timelines and the process we'll use. And then we're starting to talk to our stakeholders. And here we go again.
Mr. Heron?
Yes, I asked you this question Friday, but I'll ask it again just for the benefit of hearing the answer again. I read an awful lot these days from our new president-elect that there's going to be tons of federal money for education in a variety of ways. Does any trickle down to us?
I was reading something today. A lot of the federal is going to come through Pell Grants and things like that. It's not going to come directly to us. And that's even if you can get that, out of the hopper. The amount of federal dollars as a percentage in a school district budget is relatively minor. I mean, if you look at the revenue limit at 70-80%, then you've got, another 8, 9, 10% in state categoricals, and you throw in your locals, you might have anywhere between 3 and 7% of federal dollars. So it's and highly restricted. It's categorical funds that are targeted for usually for the most impoverished populations, and it's not going to help this situation.
Any other comments and questions, Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I was just going to ask, and you touched on it already, Mr. Smith, about the timeline. You said you'll be bringing that back to us. Do you have an idea? Because one of the questions I was wondering is, given the uncertainty of when we will know what the actual budget is, I feel like we're going to be moving ahead before we really know what the budget is. So do you have a sense of when you're going to be bringing the timeline to us?
We'll be bringing the timeline on the 27th, but I think one of the issues is that the governor and the legislature are going to have to act soon because of the impending cash crisis. So if we bring you the time frame or the timeline for the processes and procedures, I'd like to say I'm fairly confident, but I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that there'd be action by February to avert the cash crisis, and then we could tweak the time frame if we have to. But we've already started to implement, our own internal procedures. And like I said, it's going to be very similar. It's going to be analogous to last year because every dollar we save this year is $2 next year because of the compounding effect. And we'll go through the process and put on our thinking caps and go through the public hearings. And like I said, I'm calling it a fiscal solvency plan because we are solvent. We need to sustain our solvency. So, and I think the characteristic that makes this markedly different is it has nothing to do with decisions that were made at the local level or demographic. It's really been thrust upon us from the state.
Any other comments? I just wanted to say that while we can all see that the process is broken in Sacramento, the reality is that there's also just a lot less money. And so even if they were able to get through everything and be able to make some decision, we would be in a situation where we had to react to there being a lot less money available.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you said it more eloquently than I could, so.
But I want to thank you, Mr. Smith and Dr. Sarvis and all of our staff, because I feel like, and the board, because we are in a much better position now than we were a year ago and that we could have been in. And when I see what is going on already, the proposals that are coming out of other school districts for preliminary cuts, it's just absolutely devastating. And I feel like we will be in a somewhat better position thanks to our current reserve.
Yeah, and I think the other thing one of the things that helps us relative to our cash position, which a lot of districts are not in this, is that one, we started with significant cash resources because of the good job we did last year, but also our revenue limit is about 90% property tax. So you remember your revenue limit is an inverse relationship between state aid and property tax. If your district like Lompoc, I don't know this but let's say that might be more highly dependent on state aid than property tax, then you're dependent on the state to give you that money. See, we're only dependent on 10% of our revenue limit from the state, and so that helps us. We haven't done it. Somebody asked me the other day, well, hey, if the state runs out of cash, how's it going to affect you? I mean, I don't know if we can make it all the way through fiscal year end, but I think we could go a lot longer than a lot of districts because of those reasons.
All right, thank you. And now we will move on to F2, the first reading of math textbook adoption for the elementary district contingent on receipt of state funding.
I just wanted you to note that contingent on receipt of state funding. That's a key element here. Robin Zwoski is our Associate Superintendent for Education.
Yes, so yes, we intentionally put this right after Eric's report. You can see a couple of the samples up in front here, and I know that at least one board member went and reviewed the math materials and looked at them. We did, as you can see from the agenda item, the text here, we did go through the process of selecting. We've piloted. We've looked at many math series. However, we're now at the point where you can see the funding source is IMF funding and restricted lottery. Some of it's carryover, and we've been planning for this very carefully. As you know from an earlier report, we were also planning to use whatever funds we could from IMF, restricted lottery, and others for reading language arts adoption that we would fund if there was anything left, but then start with immediately July 1st, being able to purchase those after we've gone through the selection process. So here we are at major crossroads with looking at this. We decided it was already on the agenda. We're going to, go forward with a first reading. That doesn't mean we're approving the adoption at this point. We're hoping that we'll get more information by the time we meet again, as well as the fact that Meg Jate went down to in Long Beach today, went to a conference. Was it put on by CDE, School Services? And she had specific questions. We met this morning early, specific questions about the adoption, about IMF funding, about the accompanied SB 472 training that is a reimbursable program through the state. I mean, we're highly doubtful that kind of thing, particularly the training, will be put in place. We have teachers all signed up for it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are in place for this adoption. So we want to go forward with the first reading, and I'm, ready to answer questions. I will say that in talking to several teachers, talking to several administrators, and my own feeling very strongly is if we're limited and limited to an adoption or even a partial adoption, we all agree that pending Eric Smith's approval here, because he said this can go through because it's already been in the works, we would rather substitute reading language arts. It is absolutely the most critical. It is mission critical for our English learners in particular and all of our students and our staff. As much as we want new math materials, we feel that we really are desperately in need of English language arts materials. So we're going to be attending the County Education Office Fair next Wednesday and Thursday with all of those reading language arts materials. If any of you are interested, it's all day long at the auditorium up there. So we're going to look at those, and we'll have that kind of in place, to reevaluate what we're doing here. So I may be pulling this at some point if we get information that we should make a really good decision there between the two.
Board comments and questions? I did bring my incoming kindergartner to help me review.
Good idea.
And so we took a look through, and the materials look good, but could you talk briefly about the process? What was the review process?
The review process was developed by West Ed and been refined by the CDE, and their
I meant the in-district review. Like, how did you choose this in the district?
And it was a process through West Ed and CDE. That's kind of like, they call it a toolbox. And what you do is, we had a selection of we had teachers that were selected by their peers at the sites. From every one of the sites, we had a primary and upper grade, and they met over time, and they used this toolbox where they look at the materials through different lenses. So they looked for specific standards aligned to our essential standards, we're now calling them. We looked through the lens of English learners. We looked through the lens of struggling students. The teachers really looked at the math concepts to see which ones according to the blueprints from the CST released items, what things looked strongest in each one of those, the series that we looked at. So there were numerous lenses, if you will, that we looked at in selecting this, and then also the use. The teachers piloted the programs. They selected two that they thought were the best, given all of that, and then they piloted them.
Was it really clear, the choice?
It was interesting. It was not clear at first. There were some teachers who really liked one because they were using it, and then when they met, and they all talked about the pluses and minuses and all the strengths they saw and their experiences, then it was a unanimous decision by the team. In fact, we thought about having a survey. Lane Wheeler, the president of our teachers union, and I and others discussed putting a survey out just to have every teacher involved, but there was enough feedback that it had been representative enough that the union decided not to go forward with that. And they may want to do that if we go through with the reading language arts.
Okay.
So we all felt confident that it was a selection that by far the majority of teachers and everybody on the selection committee with every school represented was unanimous in it.
And then my other quick question is the 24 months deadline on this. Is there going to be
good.
flexibility from the state?
What would happen in this case is kind of, all the little restrictions like that could potentially be waived, and that's something that Meg is going to ask about as well, because we are, you know, we're in our second year here. So if we are bound to follow this, we would have to have it now, and they have to be in the hands of students by next November. We do have standards aligned textbooks now. We have our two, you know, that we bought quite a while ago. They are standards aligned, but they're not with the new framework, which is not significantly different than the old one. So, I mean, we would be okay with it. Naturally, we want new materials, but I think the state would probably okay a waiver if we needed to do that.
All right. Well, with that, we will move on to our 15-minute break. We will be back here at 9:15. Break. And Dr. Noel is heading back towards the dais, so we'll go ahead and move on to item F3, which is the review of advanced placement results.
This is the kind of report that we'd like to deliver on a yearly basis to you. And Davis Hayden is our Director, Research, Evaluation, and Technology. Dr. Hayden?
Good evening. I'm going to try and go through the slides first, and then you can ask questions afterwards because there's not that many slides to go through. So in the first slide, it's just some background information, and the next slide is going to contain most of that, so I'll just go to it. 17,000 schools in the U.S. are offered an AP exam, so that's quite a few schools are given AP test in the United States. 15.2% of seniors passed an AP exam at 3 or greater, and 19.7 in California and 19.7 in Santa Barbara School District. Now, this is a little worrisome to me because down here you're going to see that we give a lot more AP courses and AP exams, but we're actually the seniors, all the seniors. What is that?
That is the sound of someone's cell phone.
Okay.
We know that sound.
Okay. So 19.7% is low compared, and you're going to see why in a few seconds. So now of seniors taking AP exams, now these are just the seniors actually taking exam. These are all the seniors in the senior class. These are the ones taking the AP exam. 58% of the exams score 3 or greater in California. 74.8 in Santa Barbara School District, doing quite well in getting our students who take an AP exam passing the AP exams. So that's a very good statistic. And it's good for both white and Latino populations. The Latinos that take the exam do pretty good passing the exam, okay? Here's the one that's troublesome and contributes to this up here is that whereas in the state, let's see, 30% of those scoring 3 or higher are Latino. So this is 3 or higher are Latino, and it's 37% of the enrollment in the state is Latino. So it's close, 30 to 37. It's a pretty close statistic. But here in our district, it's 7%, 9%, and 20%. And so overall, 12.6%. And that is not that's not close to the percentage of Latinos in our school district. So actually, what I've just presented here is the main troublesome fact of the AP exams that you're going to see. Otherwise, we're doing a great job. And so we can celebrate the positive, but we have to look at this part too. For instance, there's 38 subjects that are possible at $86 each. Students who are in free and reduced lunch only end up having to pay $8 if they take the exam. And the average school offers 9 exams, and we have 22 to 24 tests being taken at each of our high schools. So we are actually taking a lot of exams. So students are taking a lot of different exams. AP courses, there's between 14 and 21. So these statistics look good. This is historical, and we've been seeing this for years, that San Marcos has sort of plateaued at around 250. This is number of students taking tests. So number of students taking tests, they've stayed about the same. Both San Marcos, DP and Santa Barbara High have really risen to probably a range that they're not going to go much higher on unless they get more Latinos taking the test. This is probably starting to get in the range of the max that they can get taking the AP test. They can probably go a little higher, but they need to get more Latinos taking the test. Next one is tests taken, and there's more tests taken because many students, I mean, some students take as many as 7 or 8 tests in 1 year. I mean, they really go at it. So once again, we see San Marcos lagging behind DP and Santa Barbara High. And then below is the passing rates. Passing rates mirror the number of tests taken. Remember, we have a very strong passing rate on the test. This is a summary to show courses taken, AP test, 3, 4, 5, that's a passing score at the 3 high schools. So you have that in your package. It's pretty easy to see what's going on. Now you might say, well, San Marcos has fewer students. And in the next chart, we see, oops, I went one too many. We see that there is fewer students at San Marcos High School than Santa Barbara and DP. But down here, I've put the actual percentages. So 28% is what this represents, and 18% here. Like I say, San Marcos probably has problems with its block schedule. That is probably what's going on. And I actually did an analysis. The students who take term 1 and 2, that's the first half of the year, an AP course, they have a significantly lower number of students actually taking the test than the students who take the AP classes in the second half of the year. So that's contributing to this, and also the students in the second half of the year don't finish the course by the time they're taking the AP test. That probably contributes to it. So I think a good portion of this may be due to the block schedule. That's the best I can come up with from here. You'd have to talk to the principals and the AP coordinator and see if there's other reasons here. So here's those percentages. You see this right here. Yeah.
Davis, as an alternative on that, one of the ways that I'd worked with the previous district to increase test passage was to simply ensure that all students who are enrolled in courses were taking tests. And we see a difference there between the schools, and it looks like there's quite a bit of room to encourage more students to actually take the test.
Well, exactly. And you can see here students in courses, students taking an AP test. There's a difference for each of the schools here. That could be improved if we could. If we can prove that, that would help a lot.
I'm sorry to.
No, it's absolutely true. It would be nice if we did that.
I don't want to blame a block schedule.
No, well, that's not.
Without us talking to the school.
True.
Thanks.
The only thing I know is that when I look at it statistically, that's what I find. You can see here, this is normal. You can see in another graph that the 12th graders, well, they've already been accepted into college, they're ready to go, and they take less tests. So that would be the assumption you would make here. And you'll see that for the 12th grade classes, the ones that have double asterisks around them, that's where we see this biggest dip between courses taken and AP tests taken. So that seems to be what's going on here. 12th grade AP courses have the least number of test takers. This is a Latino population of each of the schools versus white, the Latino in green and the white in orange. And then this is the percent of the total population taking an AP exam. And this is Latino and this is white. And this is San Marcos, Santa Barbara, and DP. And once again, there is a disparity, a fairly large one, between the Latino population taking AP exams and the white population taking AP exams. And this is another way of looking at it, ethnic distribution of courses taken. So this is now courses taken, and once again the Latinos are taking quite a few fewer courses than the white population. Now we have enough numbers of Chinese and Japanese that I was able to include them in this chart. Another way to look at it is this is English AP classes and ethnicity differences. Math, it's almost identical. And then we come to language, and this is mainly a lot of Latino students are taking the AP Spanish exam, especially at Santa Barbara High. Santa Barbara High accounts for more than half of the students doing that. And I took a look at the passing rate, and the passing rate for the Latino students taking the AP exam is somewhere around 67%, which is a very good passing rate for the Latino students at Santa Barbara High taking the AP exam. And so now, that's pretty much the presentation on AP courses. If you have questions, I'll take them. Anything you have.
Board members. Mrs. Deacon?
I had a couple of quick questions. Some are very basic. One has to do with the variation in number of courses offered throughout the high schools. For instance, some have more, some have less. Can you give me a little idea about the history of why that's true?
You know, I can't give you much on the history, but you did notice that at San Marcos High, there was quite a fewer course offerings than at Santa Barbara High, and actually DP has fewer too. I'm sure that Santa Barbara High has been around longer. They've probably had more development of AP exams, and I would probably defer to someone here who's been here longer to know the history of Santa Barbara High and why they have developed so many AP courses. The actual number of exams taken is pretty similar. They range from 22 to 24 at the 3 high schools, so it was only 2 different. So there's a lot of exams being taken, but yeah, more courses at Santa Barbara High.
Well, I do know, I remember talking to Paul Turnbull about it just a couple of years ago, and they really took it up as and moved it to a fevered pitch. They really felt that having those additional opportunities was a great advantage to the students, as a draw and attraction to the school, and they really worked on developing those courses.
Well, and the IB program at DP may pull some students who might otherwise be taking AP courses, I would think. But San Marcos, I mean, I wonder if it's the block schedule in part, and that reflects the number of students taking those tests.
Yeah, when it first came up, a couple years ago, it was asked, well, are they taking more Santa Barbara City College or other courses at San Marcos High, and that is drawing them away from the AP? And we did not find that. We found that actually Santa Barbara High, once again, had the greatest number of students taking Santa Barbara City College courses. So we have looked at what is going on there, and I once again, it would probably be inappropriate, as Brian mentioned, to blame the block schedule for this, but it's the major difference that I keep coming across from the 3 schools.
Any other?
Can you break that down?
Dr. Noel, did you want to?
Can you break that down and give some explanation? What is it about the block schedule?
Well, I did analyze it, as I mentioned earlier. The students in the term 1 and 2 of the block schedule take a lot fewer tests than the students in terms 3 and 4.
Why?
The explanation that I've heard, and you know, there's no one who's actually, that I know of, actually asked the students or anything like that, but the explanation I've heard is that by the time the AP test comes around, they're not ready to take them, because it's been several months now since the end of the course.
Okay.
But
So
I don't know if that's it.
It has to do, one explanation is the gap of
One explanation is the gap, yes.
the timing.
Mrs. Sawaski?
I do need to add, I know that many of the teachers hold study sessions and, special times when students who have finished in that first semester can practice and study and prepare for the test. I know that they do that. But the availability of the students, they're also busy, particularly kids who are taking AP. Who knows if they can actually fit in those sessions to their schedule, and maybe that's a reason. I don't know. Again, we haven't checked with the students.
There is one odd statistic that when I was looking at this, the courses that are offered the first and second term, and also offered the third and fourth term, have the highest rate of students taking the test. So I don't know if there's something going on there too, that the opportunities to be either studying or studying with other students or whatever. So the courses that are only offered in term 1 and 2 have the lowest number of test takers.
Okay. Other board members? Dr. Noel?
One question that's related but not directly on point. What we read about colleges and universities moving away from AP. Can you update that at all?
Yes, it is true that some are. It's the SAT is probably what you also have been reading about, is that the ACT is gaining in popularity and then the SAT is declining. But some schools are feeling that AP is too restrictive, that it doesn't give enough freedom to the students for types of courses they're taking. The AP course outlines are too restrictive, and so there is some movement away from taking AP exams. I don't think that, even though we're taking quite a few here at the Santa Barbara School District, we're not at that fever pitch that some schools were at, where they, having all AP classes and things of that nature. So maybe Robin or someone else might make a comment on whether or not we have too many AP classes. I don't think we're there right now.
And I guess, if I may,
Yes.
I guess I have to express concern about the low take rate for Latinos.
Yes.
And I don't know what we're doing about that, but it's certainly not an isolated indicator of a problem.
I can only report really on Santa Barbara High School because I had a similar conversation with Paul Turnbull, and we were also comparing, I've been to a lot of workshops and conferences on program improvement, and one of the strategies that high schools have used is to just really push heavily in getting kids into those classes and taking the test so they have the experience of what a college level course is like. They have, all of that so that it really pumps up. Eventually, it really increases the achievement of all your students. But for a while, you've got to count on the fact that your pass rate's going to go way down because you have students taking the courses and the tests that typically wouldn't have taken them. And then it just slowly builds and builds. And there's a real good example I know in San Diego and probably around the state. That is a strategy that program improvement schools are using to increase achievement.
And I want to...
I visited North Hollywood High School a few years ago. I guess at the time it had one of the best AP records in the country. And one thing that I can't recall coming away with, they used AP Spanish as a way of enticing Spanish kids who were both former English learners or Latinos into the AP system, getting the sense of success with it. And then they had some success then getting them to take more. Have we?
We do that as well.
Yes, we do.
Actually, if you saw the statistics for Santa Barbara High, that had the highest by far of Latinos taking and passing AP exams, that's exactly what they're doing. They're using AP Spanish as a course.
But I noticed that, but on Spanish is not that big of an enrollment on that one chart of yours.
No, it isn't as big as it should be. It's 50, I think 54 students at Santa Barbara High take the AP Spanish exam.
Yeah.
So it could be more, I agree, but at least it has boosted Santa Barbara High up to 20% passing the Latinos passing the exam, whereas I think it was 9 and 7 at the other two schools or something like that.
Is there any indication that they then go on and take other AP courses after having that experience, or is that an isolated thing?
I haven't looked at that one. I can look at that stat.
That would be good information to get. And I want to chime in here that I know that this year Dos Pueblos is making a real effort with U.S. history in terms of moving in students that might normally not take, underrepresented students, and giving them the support that they need. And it's something that we've talked about at the board many times. And this is a question for you, Dr. Hayden. I don't know if you have this data, but I would love, when you see the number of students taking tests and you have a trend, it's an overall one, I would love to see the Latino trend. Do you know that? Because I would like to know, are we with AVID courses, with asking counselors to push placement to really boost attendance? The numbers are really low. Are we trending upwards?
That would be easy for me to produce. I'll put it in the board brief.
Thank you. That would be good. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I had just a number of quick questions, I think. I also was wondering in terms of, and I don't know if I can figure that out on these charts, and forgive me if I'm just missing it. The percentage of all students by ethnicity who are taking the courses, I think is what you have on
There's one of the
this-
charts that's,
this
it's either
chart
the
that's
percentage of
kind of-
test or percentage of courses, I can't remember. There's one
This
chart that
says
has it.
Latino and white percent of all enrollment and percent of all enrollment taking AP exams.
Yes.
Okay, so that, but what I was trying to figure out is, when it says, for example, Latino enrollment, let's, for example, say it says 43.5%.
Is that San Marcos?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the overall percentage of Latino students
At San
enrolled
Marcos.
at San Marcos.
Is 43%.
Okay, and then when it says 2.4%,
That's 2.4% of the 1,500 students in 10, 11, and 12.
okay, so what I was trying to figure out, or what I was looking for is something that tells me, for example, what percentage of all the Latino students take an AP
I actually
course.
have that chart, and I could give it to you. I just didn't put it in here. There's another chart in there that gives you the Latino students with the 3 schools in a row. Let's see if I can bring. Well, I don't have it on anymore.
The ethnic distribution by
Yes.
course? Yeah.
Yes, and that you can. That's similar to what you're asking for.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because, for example, it says at Santa Barbara, for Latino, it says 191.
Is it?
You missed it, I think.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right.
Okay, so 190, I'm assuming that means 191 Latino students
Took a course.
a course at Santa Barbara High School.
That's right.
Okay, now, is that duplicated or unduplicated?
That would be duplicated.
That's duplicated. So it's probably a significantly smaller number than that of actual.
Not really. Probably of AP courses taken, I suspect that it's probably more like 140 or so. 120 students took an AP course that are
so
Latino.
that's 140 out of whatever the overall number of Latino students are. That's what I'm trying to figure out is what's the percentage?
I have that slide, and I can put that in the board brief. I already have it. I just didn't include it in this presentation.
And one of the reasons I'm also interested in that, because I would be interested in that for the other ethnicities as well. I'm wondering, in terms of the African American students, and even the Asian students who we tend to think of as participating in the higher level courses, are they participating in?
Yes, it's on that slide. It's for the Chinese or the Japanese, it's like 50%. It's the highest of the 4 groups.
On which slide is that? I'm sorry.
It's the slide you don't have.
Oh, the one you're going to give me. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But for African American students?
We don't have enough African American students for me to be able to put them on a slide.
Okay. But for the Latino students, I would like to see that. And then also just the overall numbers. But I can kind of see it from this slide, but these are duplicated.
Yes.
So I was wondering if there's a way of getting unduplicated
Absolutely.
numbers.
So we can put that also in a board brief. Your excellent questions, excellent slides. Some of them I actually have, but
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mrs. Deacon? I actually have 2 questions. The first one I thought maybe I should direct to Ms. Sawaski, though. Ms. Sawaski? Oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. We know one of the strategies for Latino students to succeed is to have critical mass in some of these GATE and AP classes.
Right.
When there are multiple sections of AP courses, and I suspect they're in maybe English and social studies, government, is there an effort at the sites to make sure that we have more Latino students grouped together in any one section?
I've never asked that specifically. I could guess that would be a strategy. I would hope it is, but I haven't asked that.
That's one of our AVID strategies.
It is an AVID strategy.
I think it would be useful to talk to the
Yes.
principals
Right.
and see if they could make a concerted effort
Right.
to do that.
The counselors often, in working with the AVID teacher, as you said, will often cluster students together, particularly when you're trying to push them, if not AP, into honors or something, but certainly AP. But so by the time the AVID students are together for several years, they often go into the same classes together because they study together, and so that community's in place. But I haven't asked the question if it's intentionally done.
Okay, okay.
I will.
And my second question, actually, for Mr. Hayden, would be, I suspect you're able to pull this data up too, and I'd be interested in seeing what the test score breakouts are by subject area. In other words, where, what subject areas are students scoring very well, what subject areas are we not so strong in, because that might be an indicator of the strength of the curriculum in that particular class.
I can, since I know that this language, and especially the Spanish, is at 67% for Latinos, and it was like 62% for whites, I think, in Spanish or something like that. It was a little, I believe it was a little lower for whites in Spanish than Latinos. But since the rest of them are so high that I could look, but I suspect that you may not find very many that are low in the passing rate, because we have such a high passing rate for the Santa Barbara School District across the board.
But do we have the breakouts?
I
say,
can
between-
break that out. I
Between
can definitely.
3s, 4s, and 5s in
I can do that.
biology and, yeah.
That would take a lot of space in the board brief, so would you want that personally, or should I
Yeah,
put that in the board
I would
brief?
like to see it. I don't know if others do, but I'm just curious about that.
Okay. I can provide that too.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Cordero?
Just have one more piece
I
of
hope
this.
is someone writing this down?
3s, 4s, 5s, in the board brief.
One more piece of data that I think probably will be pretty easy. How many of the AP courses are taught by Latino teachers?
That may not be easy for me to actually give you.
Ah, okay. Why?
I'd have to find out how our teachers are in the system in terms of what ethnicity they are. I believe that is a merger between two different information systems, and I think I can do that. I know I can, if it's there, I can do it, but it may be much more complicated.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. That was very informative. And we will now move on to the report on intent to approve uniform public construction cost accounting procedures, item F4.
And Dave Hetjunk, our Director of Facilities, will give this presentation.
Oops. Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. For some time, my office has been considering this. We've been looking at it for the last few years, and with Brian Tangway taking over the purchasing department, and in talking with Eric Smith, we decided the time was right to ask the board to consider adopting the uniform public construction cost accounting measures. Basically, there's two benefits, and those are listed on the frequently asked questions provided in the backup, and they are that it raises the limits for informal bidding, and it gives us some flexibility and speeds up the process. And one of the it used to be that the prices were low. Prices have gone up, prices have come back down, but we're still very limited in what we can do and the amount of time we must spend to put some bids out. And a good example I always like to give is replacing carpet. If we want to replace more than 3 rooms of carpet, we have to go through the complete formal bidding process. We have numerous excellent flooring contractors here in town who give us great prices and are always the low bidders. And we would be able to more efficiently do things like that. It would be a better use of the time spent by the project managers in putting together documents and the amount of time spent on bidding, opening bids, and things like that. It's just a better way to do business. And the state allows it. I've given you a list of numerous institutions, cities, counties, and school districts that have adopted the plan. It's an easier way for us to do business, basically.
Board questions and comments? Mrs. Cordero?
Thank you. In order to come under this act, it just takes a resolution by the board.
Takes a
correct?
resolution by the board, and then we have to notify Sacramento that we've adopted that resolution.
And then if we wanted to withdraw
We could
from
do
the
so-
act again.
we could do so
it
anytime by
takes
resolution.
just another resolution and notification again?
Correct.
Okay, so that's not a cumbersome process to withdraw?
No.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Mr. Aaron?
One of the biggest things I heard when I was visiting campuses the last several months was the time that it takes to get things done. And when I read the bids, construction and purchases, and comments like if it's between $500 and $15,000, it takes weeks to accomplish the process, and over $15,000, it takes months to accomplish the process. You know, I need my heater fixed, I call my heater and they come out and fix it. I think this is fantastic. I like this very much.
It's more in line with the limits that we can use to purchase items. It's funny that the bid limits for actually purchasing equipment are up and raised every year by the superintendent of public instruction for schools up to $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, where yet we're way down here at $15,500 for construction. So it just didn't make sense.
That's exactly the point I was going to make. It used to be that the $15,000 threshold was for work to be performed, and there was a threshold of $21,000 for purchase of materials and equipment. Well, largely due to the efforts of CASBO about 10 years ago, working with the legislature, that was first raised to $50,000 and then adjusted annually for inflation, and now it's up to like, I don't know, $76,000. But the Public Works bid was never raised, and this is an alternative measure that the State Controller's Office allows us to engage in, and it will not only address the issues you were talking about, it also gives Dave another benefit because in the Public Contract Code, you're limited what they call a forced labor account, and you can only use your internal people up to $7,500 on a project before you're subject to penalty through the Department of Industrial Relations. This raises that to $30,000 for internal work to be performed. So there's actually two benefits there.
Any other, Mrs. Deacon?
I was just going to say, when I read this, I almost cheered because it does seem to me that the benefits in terms of efficiency and saving staff time really will be something that our sites will benefit from. So I was very happy to see this.
Would you like to see the resolution on consent?
That's the question I was going to ask. Is this something that can come to consent, or does it have
Yes.
to be? All right, then yes. I personally would like to see it on consent as opposed to open. Dr. Noel, any comments on? Do you have any comments or questions? All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now on to item F5, report on establishment of parcel tax citizen committees.
Well, with the passage of Measure H and Measure I, we need to establish citizens committees to oversee this process. And we need to do that before Groundhog's Day. So at our next board meeting, I would like to bring an action item to you to establish the two committees, one for the elementary district for Measure I and one for the secondary district for Measure H. And I have included in this the pertinent ed code language, and we started the process hoping to be able to speed it along a little bit about brainstorming who might be on these committees. I'd like to draw your attention to that page, if I may. It's the last page on this attachment. We included people who were significantly involved in the campaign. We may have missed some. If we did, you'll want to jump in, but this would really be, these would really be community members who are appointed by the board. And I haven't approached these people directly, so they're not on the list because I went to them and said, will you be on the list? We need 7 people. We could go to 9 people, but we would have to keep it an uneven number. So I think we captured those who are most involved in the campaign. Some of those have talked to me. I have talked to some of them. Some people have come forward from the community. For instance, we have Doug Martin here, who's the Chief Financial Officer for the Sheriff's Department, who came forward and said, I would be happy to serve on the committee of his own accord. We didn't approach him. I could simply hear from you about people that I should contact. I'm not sure that everyone would even say yes. But if I could get a start on the list.
Board members, Dr. Noel?
Well, I'd like to be able to submit some names, some possible, or some criteria, if not names.
Anybody have names that they want to add, or?
I
Mrs.
actually had
Deacon?
one because I was hopeful that there would be some representatives of the music community in Santa Barbara participating, maybe particularly in the elementary one. And Adrian Spence is the director of Camerata Pacifica. I don't know if he'd be willing to serve. I actually put a little feeler out just to ask if he would be, but with no promise of selection. One thing I know people are going to ask is how often the meetings are, and I'm assuming that's monthly. Is that right? Or do we know?
I thought it was quarterly, excuse me.
I wasn't
I didn't
listed if it's in
see it
here.
listed. I mean, I would think that you'd have to meet as often as you needed to meet. Measure V, our bond meetings have been once a month.
We'd probably start on a monthly basis.
And I think I also ran into Charlotte Ware and asked if she might be interested, and she was going to think about it. So I think she'd be good.
Mr. Herron?
Do they have to live within the district?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes,
Yeah. I
within
think-
either
I think
the
Adrian lives
elementary district or
Yeah.
within both districts.
I think Adrian lives in Summerlin now. Yeah, but I guess my question is, with the Measure V at the City College, they actually, publicized that there were openings and they solicited applications. Do we need to do anything like that at all?
We could do that.
I just they had it on their website, they had the application, and they just had news releases saying, hey, if you're interested, submit the application. And there were a couple questions on there as to, why do you want to do this? What's your
Okay.
reason?
Dr. Noel?
Thank you. I'm kind of picking up on the way I think we're thinking about this. Perhaps if this person is not available, how about like the executive director of the Santa Barbara Symphony? Or I kind of look at the institutional thing and say, okay, here's a rule, whoever's on there, that's our person. So we don't pick someone by name, but we kind of move back a bit. Otherwise, it tends to get a little bit personalized, arbitrary.
Well, John Robinson, by the way, is the president of the Santa Barbara Education Foundation as well.
Same
So
John.
He would be a natural choice, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I just wanted to second Mr. Herron's suggestion that we publicize this as widely as possible so people can apply if they're interested. But also, once we come forward, like we have here with a list, if we could have maybe just, I appreciate the fact that you included their affiliation here. But
Yes.
if there was a possibility to have just a tiny bit more information about the individuals, in terms of maybe just a little bit of their background.
Well, if you'd like us to go through an application process, then we'll do that for everyone.
I think that would actually
And we'll
be-
ask all of these people to go through an application process as well.
I would like that.
Dr. Noel?
This left-hand column where you say, as per Ed Code, that is a definitive list of the requirements of the Ed Code, those categories of,
It's on the preceding page, middle of the preceding page, you see the Ed Code requirement.
okay.
Committee
Oh, okay, yeah.
of at least 7. And it
All
does
right.
have the designated areas.
Okay, thank you. I have read that before and had forgotten it.
All right, well, I think we've given some direction there. And with that, we will move on to item F6, discussion of measures to control access and prevention of weapons from entering junior and senior high schools. This was requested to be on the agenda by Dr. Noel, and I'm sure Dr. Noel has comments to make, but I think that we will give it to Dr. Sarvis to give us some information about that.
Well, of course, with the killing that we had 2 years ago, we all had a heightened awareness about weapons on campus. And our site administrators, campus supervisors have done quite a bit to be on the lookout, take every opportunity to, when a student is involved in any sort of an altercation or any sort of an activity that they believe warrants a search, they do search the students. We have a number of procedures in place, although, Dr. Noel, you may want to comment on this. Would you like a report first?
I'd love a report.
Okay.
That's exactly what I had in mind.
In that case, I'm going to ask Michael Gonzalez to give us more of a formal report rather than me just talk about some of the things we're doing.
Thank you. One of the things that we encourage all of our school sites administrators as well as our campus safety assistants to do is perimeter checks. I'll give you an example. After the death of Angel Linares, I was assigned to Santa Barbara Junior High as an extra hand, extra pair of eyes and ears. And one of the things that I conducted was a perimeter check for the several days that I was there, including the adjacent Ortega Park. We took that idea, and with our safety officer, Mr. Andrews, we encouraged all schools to conduct those kinds of perimeter searches. As a matter of fact, Mr. Andrews has personally conducted a number of those kinds of perimeter searches. I also want to go back, and earlier this evening, Dr. Sarvis mentioned a recent tool that we're utilizing both at San Marcos High School as well as Santa Barbara Junior High, the Principom, this very simple tool that permits any administrator or campus supervisor to identify intruders or students or people who shouldn't be at a particular campus. But I want to go back and remind you that I think it was August 2007, at your request, staff issued to you a study on 21 different aspects of student safety that you asked about. You may recall that one of the proposals, one of the areas that you asked us to look into was the costs of fencing our 3 high schools, and we gave you a very preliminary estimate on what it would take to set up chain link fences at our 3 high schools. At that time, the cost, I believe, was about $750,000. We also, you also asked us to explore the idea of using metal detectors. At that time, we shared with you 2 points of view. One was the experience out of LA Unified that pretty much said that they were not convinced that using metal detectors was the best utilization of resources. But I pointed out to you folks in the same memo that Cecilia over at El Puente does use a metal detector, a wand type metal detector with her students every single day. And Cecilia was completely convinced that without that tool, that school would not be as safe as it currently is. I will also share with you that Mr. Andrews researched a number of schools within our area. One of them is the Oxnard Unified School District. I would like you to note that they have been employing metal detection systems for quite a number of years. They have actually established board policy and administrative regulations that in a practical way, classrooms are picked at random, and a school administrator will actually in the morning select the class that's going to be checked for weapons, and with again a wand, every single student in that class is checked for metal detection for weapons or guns or knives. And
there's some safeguards that are required, and part of the safeguard is it's random, and then two, that every single student who attends that class is checked. Those three areas, the idea of restricting access to a school by virtue of fencing, or tools like Principalm that allow staff to make an immediate identification, are you supposed to be on that campus or not, or metal detection, at this time represent the most widely used tools for prevention of weapons being brought on campus. You also may recall that you asked us to explore the area of video cameras. And at that time, I shared with you that Paul Turnbull, who had recently left his position as the principal at Santa Barbara High, had, because of his close relationship with a contractor who also happened to be a parent of the school, came in with a very modest bid for setting up video cameras at certain locations. As you may recall, our director of facilities pointed out that the regulations would not permit us to buy video cameras on at prices below market. I share that with you because we have done much research in this area, and video cameras can be a very expensive proposition. As a matter of fact, our director of facilities has a background in what has been used in Las Vegas. Las Vegas obviously has access to the best security companies and utilization, because that's what they use to protect the gambling casinos. And so multi-million-dollar video surveillance systems are in place at Las Vegas schools, but their resources are very much considerable compared to ours. We also shared with you in previous discussions with the board that last year we began a series of in-service trainings for not only our assistant principals in the area of prevention, but also our campus safety assistants, and those kinds of trainings continue to this day. So that's a very brief overview of the kind of prevention programs that are currently in place. I also shared during the break with Dr. Noel that this Friday we're scheduled to hold the interviews for the outreach workers that were authorized by the board. And so soon we should have one or more coming on board very quickly. Hopefully we'll find appropriate candidates on Friday. Okay.
Questions and comments from board members? Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I appreciate having this item on and getting that update. Let me tell you why, the thing that concerns me mostly, and I explained that this will be redundant for you two who got it in a memo. But of course, there's the issue of the possibility of something bad happening, and that's immeasurable. But there's also something that's more tangible, an assessment of risk, and I've felt, and the campus of particular concern to me is Santa Barbara High School, which has so many points of entry. I was recently on the Palo Alto High School campus, very lovely campus, open, nice and receptive, but there's only one, there's a big entrance, but it's only one. No side entrances, no back entrances. And I've always felt that rather than looking at the fencing problem writ large, might want to segment it into what could be done to start to restrict the entrance at that campus, and would that increase the security and lessen the risk? When you look, I look at this a little bit from a legal perspective. What is the exposure that we have to being named if something horrible happens, to being found negligent for not having taken positive actions. And negligence can cost you a lot of money. And it seems to me that if nothing else, even if one doesn't go for, especially now with the money problem, if one can't go for an expensive package or even a moderate package, that a plan and something that looks like here is our risk reduction plan, and here are the people, how we're going to use existing resources, and here is a modest expenditure of equipment for equipment and so on. That this, if we had something written up in place as a board policy to cover this, that this would be very important to the financial side of this for the district. Reducing the vulnerability basically to possible lawsuits.
Thank you. Any other comments right now? I want to share that when I was down at the California School Boards Association, the most enlightening and alarming session that I went to was about student safety on campus. And we focus a lot on students bringing weapons onto campus. But in fact, this was a presentation by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. And of an equal national concern is that they are absolutely convinced that there will be a terrorist attack on an American school within the next 2 years. And that is something, we can talk about Santa Barbara High and all its access points, but frankly, La Colina Junior High, Goleta Valley Junior High, all of the junior highs have no fencing around them, or not complete fencing, I should say. So it's easy to walk, easy access. And there's, what his point was is that honestly there's nothing that you can do to prevent a coordinated terrorist attack, but what you can do is make your school as unattractive as possible. And one of the first things that they recommend doing is coming in and doing a security assessment of your schools. How easy is it for somebody to come onto a campus? How soon are they notified? What are the weak points? What are places that administrators and campus security need to pay attention to? And I really think that we need to be talking with the Sheriff's Department and Santa Barbara PD to be putting together security assessments for all of our schools. And in terms of things like, Santa Barbara High, which is so open and has so many access points, we may not be able to completely close it off, but you could reduce it so that it's easier to monitor. And I'm very interested in the idea of doing sort of random weapons checks with the wand. I think that's probably more of a better deterrent than having something that kids are going to learn how to get around in terms of something that you pass through a metal detector, and also which just wouldn't work at a number of our schools. So, Dr. Noel?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed that television costs so much, and I would hope that maybe there's a cheaper way than the Las Vegas way. And one of the reasons is because most of my concerns came when I started reading those Healthy Kids surveys. And you don't have a lot of kids bringing knives on, but then you have some kids who say, "I do it all the time," or words to that effect, and that's frightening. One thing I read at the same time was one of those school safety committee reports at Santa Barbara High. Do I have the right terminology? And I remember the faculty saying that they were asked to, have we done enough? Are we sort of okay, or are we really in weak spot? And one of them had to do with being able to see or surveillance of just selected parts of that campus. And I don't know what parts they had in mind, but that sticks in my mind that it may not have to do the whole enchilada, but very selectively devote some resources that would enhance or reduce risk is the way I like to think about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will move on to, it's 10:10 or so. We may have a little bit of time to talk about the discussion of development of a youth violence prevention plan. Again, this was requested by Dr. Noel, and I will give it to Dr. Sarvis to give us an update.
I want to quickly say to my colleagues that this is an accumulation of things that have been sort of like floating around for a long time. This wasn't a massive attack.
Well, as Dr. Noel would probably say, a couple of things have happened in the interim. One is that we put a steering committee together for the outreach workers, and that committee has been meeting, and I'm expecting to bring an item to you at the next meeting. Perhaps I can give you a report then on the steering committee. We've been discussing specifically curriculum, what curriculum is delivered in the classroom, across all levels, and what curriculum we would expect the outreach worker to be involved in, and evaluation and monitoring plans. In fact, we had quite an instructive discussion of evaluation and monitoring, and that fits right into the need for an evaluation and monitoring plan on the part of the county and community education, excuse me, and that ties into the need for the community collaborative process and their steering committee, which I know many of you attended this Monday morning, and their need for an evaluation plan. So there's some possibility of piecing parts of this all together, because that would cost us money to have it done independently, and we probably should have it done independently. Well, one of our main points of discussion was about how you establish a relationship with these kids who are most at risk, and whether you could do that on a short-term basis or whether they would see it as, oh sure, you're going to show up in my life and really care about me until the end of June. Then you'll be gone, just like a lot of adults in my life. And one of the things that we have discussed is whether we would be better off using that money that we earmarked to put one person in place and extend that position so that we have that position over a longer period of time. And that also fits into the community process where you'll recall in August and September when I came to you, I said, this is unfolding rather rapidly, and we expect to have the whole plan, the whole enchilada done this spring. Have funding in place for the entire community. Well, that's no longer likely. So one of the items that I'd like to bring back for your discussion, in fact, I'd like to bring back as an action item, is whether you would consider using that money that was earmarked to put just one person in place and extend that for a full year rather than put two people in place for a limited period of time. But I'll bring that back to you so that we can discuss that.
Board comments and questions, Dr.
Well,
Noel?
I'm just, my recollection is that when Nancy Harder made the motion that we had, and it was a long, tediously worded motion, which then went through a bunch of revisions and iterations, all verbally, that part of it, the distinction was made between intervention and prevention. And that part of the charge was at some point, and I'm hazy about the point, there would be attention paid to the prevention side of the house.
Oh, definitely so.
And I have this on, I asked for this because I wanted to see what's going on and if possible, move that along.
Well, the committee sees that as their charge, yes.
Yes, Mrs. Sawatsky?
In addition to working with our principals, just this Thursday, we have our monthly meeting. And both elementary and secondary in separate times are going to be looking at the district-wide youth violence prevention pyramid of interventions, really, and looking at what are all students provided with curriculum as well as different kinds of interventions. So it's a little bit prevention and intervention together, but then working up the pyramid so that you can see what those most at-risk kids at the different levels, elementary and secondary, are provided in all of our schools. So we're going to work together. We have a model that we're going to use, a template that two of our junior high principals put together, and then we're going to add to it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to be specific about what activities and programs really are effective, and how do we know what kind of data are we showing, you know? And it blends a little bit, of course, with the academic and the behavioral social piece, because when you're getting more success academically, the other piece, you know, for many kids, not all. So just this Thursday, we're going to be completing that. When we have something put together, which I would hope by the end of Thursday we'll have at least a draft piece, we could put those pyramids in a board brief, and we could later present those and give you more information.
I'd love to see the pyramids, and then I would love to hear at a report about where administrators identified weaknesses and
The gaps.
the gaps,
Mhm,
and,
right.
and what or what it's not working, and then what suggestions are for addressing that.
Okay.
Does that sound good, Dr. Noel?
I just, you know, that, it's been months now, but I spent some time browsing around that Surgeon General's report. It was a wealth of information. I think it was like 3 or 4 years out of date, so it's a problem. In fact, I remember sending an email to one of the organizations that had a very high rating for age 9 through 18 or something like that, kids, and the email went to the wrong place and came back, and basically that program they don't really do anymore, but hey, basically we're consultants and we'll come and help you. So you can't take these things at face value, but my question is, do we have some resource that we could put towards going through that report? And there's also, I found a White House-based website that was just full of research and ratings of programs. I can probably find that URL.
Yeah, that might be really useful for you to bring to talk.
That'd be very helpful.
If all this work's been done, I would just love to have someone tell us whether any of it's worthwhile.
Mr. Heron?
If you're interviewing Friday,
Yes.
are you interviewing for 2 people for the rest of the year, or 1 person for a year? Does that influence who you're going to interview and what kind of candidates you're going to get for the interview? If they don't know it's a year's job, are you going to get the same type of candidates as if it's a half a year job?
We understand that difficulty. We'll see who these people are. And our intention right now, until we have clearer direction from the board, is to select the one top person. The job description that was approved by the board ends at the end of June. So that's our current restriction. We can't really give them the promise that it would be for a year.
Mrs. Deacon?
I just wanted to say one thing. One of the things that really struck me at the meeting Friday was the comment that our community is rich in resources, but our weakness is collaboration. And it sure seems to me that whoever we hire, that their role might be in part to work with our teachers, who are really our boots on the ground, to train them to identify students at risk and then try to pair them with the wealth of resources that are in the community and match them up with programs that are working already and are successful. Maybe these are after-school programs and not necessarily in-school programs, but it certainly seems like a fruitful avenue to pursue.
All right, thank you very much. And we will now return to consent items designated for discussion. And we will start with D1, which was me. I pulled we passed the other minutes, but I specifically pulled the November 25th minutes. And the reason I did was because I felt that on the bottom of page 2 of 5, there's a sentence, Board Member Harder moved to allow Board Member Noel to speak for 1 minute to the superintendent's report. I think that it needs just one additional sentence there, the motion was not seconded. And then move on to, there was further discussion among board members. But then my larger question is, in the F sequence, F5 is listed where F5 is, but in fact, I believe that we pulled item F5 after item F1. And I really maybe Dr. Noel, maybe you remember if you voted on this, because this was one of the reasons why you left the meeting. Sorry, I'm now on page 4 of 5.
Page 4 of 5?
Yeah. And so item F5, it says ayes 4, no 0, and absent 1, Dr. Noel, but I just can't, I thought that you were still here for that particular vote, and that it took November 25th? You know, that's the one where you left, yes, you left after this motion happened, but that motion happened at, right before F2. So it's just awkward in terms of the way it's structured, but I think it needs to be looked at. So I'd just like to pull that for now and double check on it. So that's D1. Then the next one was D3. Approval of staff travel out of state, and Dr. Noel, I believe you pulled this one.
Oh, can you go back to the minutes?
Oh, sorry, was it, oh, the minutes, yes.
Minor point, but on page 2 of 5, it says I was introduced, but I was in Connecticut. Oh, okay.
Are we on the consent now?
Yes. So now we're on to D3, and,
My questions about D3 and 4
okay, so is there a motion?
I move to approve D3 and D4.
Second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, it passes. Noel moved and Deacon seconded, and it passed unanimously. All right, then on to we did D14. We passed it.
I think Mr. Smith already explained this. I saw some charges here on accounts that are, as he mentioned, is freeze.
That are now going to be frozen.
This predates that, right? Okay, then no problem with D14. D15,
Do you want to go ahead and,
well, I move to adopt D14.
is there a second? D14? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. All right, so D15, Dr. Noel.
D15, there I had a question about the law offices of Andrew and Marcus, who took the name that I don't recall, $13,000 special education legal services. The name Full Cross was fairly new to me. Is this something old or is this?
What page?
Well, we'll have to go see. If you'd like to approve, well, oh boy.
Can we approve it all except for PO 93071 and then
Well-
come back to it?
I guess my concern is that if this is part of a settlement or part of an agreement, that then we're not acting on. I just want to make, I just want to make sure that we move forward on this. Could I just give you well, here's what I would request. I would recommend that you approve this and I give you information on it.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would recommend that we approve this and that we trust you to make sure that it's,
Okay.
that everything is proper.
Thank
Okay,
you.
would you care to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. And then D17, approval of mobile cafe staff and program development grant agreement.
Well, I think we answered the question on this also. Thanks, I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And, I think that might be, yes.
Yes, good.
Yes, we approved D3 and D4 at the same time. Okay. So now we are on to coming events. Any coming events? We all already heard about the huge list of coming events at all of our school sites, and I look forward to seeing that in the e-news and online so that people can attend.
We'll be giving you more information on those.
Okay.
Can I
Yes.
just chime in real quick? Dr. Sarvis, if you
Yes.
recall, for a couple of meetings, I think you were giving us a copy of your report on the dais.
In fact, we were expecting to today, but the list was so long and it wasn't filled out with all the details. So Barbara said, I'm just not ready to bring it forward, but I will.
Okay, great,
So-
thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any board comments and correspondence to share? Mr. Herron?
Just a few things, and number one, Mimi, this is the first time since I've been involved in this that the minutes are current. We're up to date, and I think that's fantastic, because when I started here, looking into this, we were 3-4 months behind, I think, at the time, or a lot of months behind. And the fact that we're up to date, I think, is fantastic.
Thank you for noting that.
It was even worse than that a while back.
Yeah, it sure helps from a public standpoint. When you read an agenda, it's nice to know what happened. And I never could find out what happened on many, many things. So I personally appreciate it very much. I also found on the website a whole list of acronyms. And I know I know Barbara and her staff did a lot putting that together. And as a new member, it helps me. I think we need to add PIP and IMFRP and a whole bunch of others. But this list will keep growing. But if you haven't seen it, it's on the web, and it sure helps when you're reading stuff to be able to find out what things mean. So I thank that. And then I have to mention that lately, I think we've had really, really good PR, and it's not of our own doing. It's the papers coming forward and giving us PR. And, I use the example, well, although this wasn't PR necessarily, but it was an article in the paper about Jack O'Connell and his physical fitness. Academic achievement go hand in hand. And I was very pleased when I went to the website that Cesar Chavez is the number one, it's the number one of its category, 100% participation in their children having active in this governor's or the school superintendent's physical activity. It's the only school that we have. I wish there were more, but the fact that Cesar Chavez is giving physical education a priority, I think, and is good for their children. I noticed that Lacumba Middle School, or it says middle school, Lacumba Junior High, worked with United Way and got public relations on their Red Binder project, which to me is very important because it's stressing things other than academics. It's talking about making the children good public participant people, and it means a lot. I attended the Don's Net Cafe, and I was when they had their grand opening, and I was very, very pleased that the news press staffer followed me, parked behind me, got his equipment out, and he was there the entire event. And on the front page, there was a beautiful color picture of the students and their graph showing their income projections. And there was also the group doing the chicken dance. What that proved to me is the news press staffer was there at the beginning and at the end, and he did the whole thing. And again, it was a very good article. And then the topper, is the information and the publicity on the Kids Helping Kids Unity Shop, where they did such a fantastic job this weekend raising money. I think well over $100,000. So I think what I enjoy is the fact that, number one, the news press, along now with the Daily Sound and Newshawk and others, seem to be following what our schools are doing, and we're doing good things. And it's not just all negative. And so I'm very pleased that I think we're getting some more real good, positive influence in the community.
Although I have to share that I was a little disappointed that I did not win the Vespa in the raffle.
I have
But
the
it was a
numbers on
great
that, by the way.
concert. Oh, you do have the numbers?
Yes.
Well, would love to hear them next time. I really would love to put a focus on that because, man, they do a tremendous job.
Yes.
So thank you to San Marcos for doing that. Any other board comments or
I
correspondence?
was just going to say, any of you who haven't attended the Don's Net Cafe grand openings should make a point of doing it in the future because they are great events. And you would not, I mean, you can't be more proud of a group of students than when you watch them give their presentation. On top of which, it's always followed by a delicious lunch. So just to encourage people to go.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will move on to future agenda items. I think that we already have quite a list of future agenda items.
We do, and we have a special board meeting this next Tuesday, January 20, at 4 p.m. We are also looking at a date in early February for a board workshop on parliamentary procedure and other board agenda items, and have not set that date yet.
Right. All right, well, it's only 10:32.
Shall we?
Can we go?
Let's all do
All
the
right.
chicken dance.
With that, we will close the meeting.